Good morning and thank you for joining. I'm Araceli Cruz, Calbright Senior Marketing Manager. Today, I'd like to welcome you to our Board of Trustees meeting on Monday, November 16th, 2020. Please follow along with our agenda on Board Docs. You can find the link on our website, calbright.org, under About Board of Trustees. Today, we'll start with a board study session and the board will enter a closed session immediately following. When we return to open session, attendees who wish to make public comment, please use the Q&A feature in Zoom to request to address the board for up to 3 minutes. Public comments should be pertaining to today's agenda. If you have any additional questions, please direct them to our communications director by emailing taylor@calbright.org. A reminder, this board meeting is being recorded. And with that, I'd like to introduce our board president, Tom Epstein.
Thank you, Araceli, and welcome everyone. We will start with the roll call.
Good morning. Hildegard Aguinaldo.
Here.
Darius Anderson.
Here.
Amy Costa.
Here.
Tom Epstein.
Here.
Felicia Escobar Carrillo.
She's on mute.
Felicia.
Sorry, here. Sorry.
Colm Fitzgerald. Jolena Grande.
Here.
Pam Haynes.
Here.
Kevin Hole.
Here.
Lieutenant Governor Ilani Kounalakis.
Here.
Jennifer Perry. Bill Rawlings. Valerie Shaw. Yulia Tarasova.
Present.
Blas Villalobos.
Here.
And Joseph Williams.
Here.
Okay, so now we'll do the Pledge of Allegiance. Kevin Hull, you want to lead us on the pledge? Kevin? Maybe he's on mute.
I said proudly, okay. Tom.
Okay, thanks.
I pledge allegiance
to the flag
of the United States of America. America. Republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. The first thing I want to do is discuss the order of the agenda. We are going to do to make a change from what is in the agenda that you'll find on board docs. After we do the consent agenda, we are going to go into item 6, which is information and reports. We're going to go through all of that, and we're going to have public forum. And then we will go up to the action item number 5, and we will take a motion to adjourn and continue the meeting Tuesday at noon. And if that motion carries, then we will reconvene at noon on Tuesday and do item 5.2, the appointment of executive committee members. So that is the plan. So with that now, I'm going to give my president's report. This is my last meeting as president of Calbright, and I've been there since the very beginning of when the legislature enacted the law that created it. And I want to thank every member of the board, and especially the executive committee, for all the hard work you've done to keep Calbright moving forward. And though I mentioned it in our executive committee last month, I also, of course, want to acknowledge the wonderful work that Alma Salazar did in her very brief time on our board, and she also served on the executive committee and was very helpful. I want to provide just a few observations on Calbright's first 2 years here on my way out the door as president. Obviously, it was a bumpy and eventful ride. We had a disappointing launch, and we had some personnel changes that slowed down the progress. But thanks to the governor and the legislature and unions and business groups and other advocates, Calbright is still here and serving the students it was intending to serve. And I believe now that we've really turned the corner. So as we consider our 3-year strategy today, I think there's a few things to keep in mind. One is this is still a startup. We need to set expectations accordingly. I know we've been held to some phony standards like how much cost per student served so far, but that's really not an accurate measure. We need to look at the long term and run our full 5 to 7 year startup period. I also think the new leadership that we've brought in deserves a chance, and they've made significant progress already. They've created a new organizational structure and have a new team. They've reformed the learning experience with the help of the Academic Senate and many other participants. They've developed new alliances with colleges and employer outreach organizations that are going to bear fruit over time, and we're making progress on accreditation. And I think that the COVID crisis only reinforces the value of Calbright and the wisdom in creating it. The need for online education is obviously much more prevalent today than it was just a year ago. And competency-based education is clearly a way to provide the flexibility that adult learners need in order to achieve new credentials. And in fact, there's a meeting on the Board of Governors agenda today that will enact regulations around competency-based education for the whole system. And also with the pandemic, there's been higher unemployment, which means more stranded workers, which is, of course, the target audience for Calbright. And I believe that Calbright is already showing value for the community college system. We've given help to colleges with COVID issues, with technology and with Wi-Fi and with mental health services. And we've developed these relationships with Compton and Bakersfield, and there's more on the way. And finally, we're on the road to collective bargaining and participatory governance, 2 items that I know some of our constituencies have been looking for, and we're well on the way to getting those going as well. So with that, my intent was to turn it over to CEO Menon for her remarks. I'm not sure if she's able to do that now. And if I don't hear from her in a minute, we're going to move right into the next agenda item. Okay, we will hear the president's report later. So now we'll kick off the Calbright board study session, item 2. And I'm just going to give a minute here of setting the stage for that. Today's mission is really part of the process to develop a strategic vision for Calbright in the same way that we have developed a strategic vision for the Board of Governors. We're looking for board input on what success could look like for Calbright 3 years down the road. And in terms of setting the context, obviously there's a challenging economic environment with COVID and the state budget, rising unemployment, and structural workforce changes. The pandemic's disproportionate impact on target learners, the lower income adult workers that are women and people of color and in the service sector that have been most impacted by the job losses. And as I just mentioned, Calbright today has shown progress after the leadership change, but we're still learning. We're still testing and learning how to build a sustainable model. And we're facing the usual political, budget, and communication challenges. So for today's session, our focus is really on the future and on strategy, not on tactics. And we're looking for input from all the board members. We're not making decisions today. We will vote on this strategic vision at our next full board meeting in January. And I'm hoping for an active conversation. If lots of people want to speak at the same time, please signal your desire to speak in the chat, and Marissa will manage the flow and make sure everybody has an opportunity to be heard. And since we do have a lot of people who I think are going to want to weigh in, please keep your remarks to a minute or two so we can hear from as many of you as possible. And so with that, I'm going to hand it off to our consultant who's been developing this program, and it's Lauren Asher, who is a strategic vision consultant and our session facilitator. Take it away, Lauren.
Sorry, classic Zoom mistake. Thank you, President Epstein, and all the trustees, including for starting earlier than usual today to make time for this session. I have seen how invested you all are in Calbright's success, and I'm looking forward to hearing more from all of you. And as Tom said, the more actively you participate, the more useful today's work will be. Just a reminder, I think we should go to the slides. And Denzel, I want to thank all the staff at Calbright, including Denzel Codrington, who is going to be managing the slides for this part of the discussion. And we're going to try some interactive stuff online that I think is new for all of us. So bear with us. If we can go to the next slide. You may recognize this slide from prior meetings. It's just a reminder about the purpose of this overall process. Today's session is one key part of the work to clarify and communicate Calbright's goals for the next stage of development at a strategic level. And as Tom mentioned, the ultimate goals are to better inform internal decision-making and prioritization as Calbright learns and grows and responds to changing conditions, and also to support external communication about Calbright and its high-level goals. So next slide, please. Here's a general timeline of where we are in the process. Again, may look familiar. We're towards the end of the first phase, which includes gathering input from multiple stakeholders with a range of perspectives. And I've been having really rich and useful conversations across a range of stakeholder reps. Today is all about your input as trustees. Next slide, please. So for today's session, here's what we're trying to accomplish. We want to have you guys provide forward-looking input on Calbright's strategic direction. I'm really here to facilitate and synthesize and try and make sure we stay on track, but the point is to hear from all of you. And to start developing for the board a shared vision of what success in 3 years looks like, or could look like. So we're going to do 3 main activities. The first is to review and discuss the analysis that I've done of all of your responses to the pre-work questions about perceptions, hopes, and concerns, and then have a discussion about that. We're going to do a SWOT exercise, which is a strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats exercise. Some of you may have done them before. I'll share more about that when we get there. And we're going to do that live with a document that I'm filling out while we all talk, or you all talk. And then we'll identify some key high-level elements of near-term success from your perspective as trustees. Next slide, please. So before we dive in, and you have to listen to me talk more, I wanted to just do a really brief warm-up and give every trustee a chance to hear each other's voice. So here's a question to ask yourself. What's something you read or saw recently that made you think about Calbright and the positive role it could play? It could be in the near future or beyond. It could be specific or general. Keep your answer short, just 1 or 2 sentences. And we'll start with volunteers whenever anyone's ready, and then go around the rest of the virtual room. And I'm going to try and make sure I can see everyone. Maybe visually raise your hand. Be patient with me as I scroll through. Anyone want to jump in first? Oh, Amy.
The unemployment rate, both nationally and California has some different trends.
I'll jump in, Kevin.
Please.
Just the fact that with this pandemic, we see that online learning is essential.
Feel free to jump in, folks. Go ahead.
This is Darius. We've been doing a bunch of hiring recently in one of our businesses because we're starting something new. And we've been talking to a lot of people about what they're looking for in a COVID environment. And they've been talking a lot about online learning. You can't do training in person, and people want skills and be able to develop skills outside of being on site.
This is Joseph. I'm hoping that with Joe Biden being in the White House, it'll open up some unique opportunities for Calbright and for the state.
Because this is Plus. mean, it's, with COVID, it's made it clear how important technology is going to be, and it is now, but it is going to be in the future in terms of remote training and making sure that our students are well equipped to take on the positions that are hopefully going to become available soon.
Hi, everyone. This is Jolena. I have heard the word cybersecurity more often in the last week than ever before. And every single time I hear it, I think of Calbright and how valuable that particular path is going to be now and going into the future.
This is Hildy. I recently read an old article on the closure of ITT and their predatory lending practices. And I'm hoping that Calbright could play an important role in getting all the folks left behind from that service back on the right track, even though it's been years already.
So this is Pam. So I've been thinking about this from the perspective of the worker and the student, and in that dislocation, that the actual transformation of work is a continuous process. And so in years past, you could almost count on staying in a job for 20 years. You could count on sort of retiring. And that process across the world has changed, but in particular in this country. And so you can't count on that. And so we need efficient ways of training and providing access to good paying jobs that require us to rethink what we consider to be education and what we consider to be training, and then the time it takes to do that kind of training and education, and what are the vehicles that we use to do it, because that transformation is not going to go away. It's not going to go away with COVID. There's going to be something else that we're going to have to address relative to the world of work. And I think that Calbright is situated in a place where it can actually help us do that work, but help us think about how to do that work in a system-wide way.
Yulia or Felicia or Tom?
Sure, I'll go. I think Calbright can play a positive role in forwarding the leadership on online education. A lot of colleges are struggling how to teach students and what's the best effective practices to do that. So I think Calbright can play an important role here.
And this is Felicia. I mean, so I do a lot of work in other parts of the country, including Colorado, that are, where people are thinking about, the what happens next in higher education due to COVID. And so I'm often thinking about the Calbright College model when I'm talking to colleagues who are in Colorado and are struggling with how best to educate people and how to keep people engaged in school in their learning while they're juggling a bunch of other things due to COVID. So that's something that kind of comes to mind on a weekly basis for me.
And the Lieutenant Governor, sorry, I was looking at the wrong screen. Is there anything you want to share? We'll come back.
My apologies. Thank you. Lauren, you called on me. Is that right?
I did. Give me.
So I guess as I have been trying to learn as much as I can in my new capacity here and understand how the process has evolved in the establishment of Calbright, what I just keep thinking about is how much the world has changed and how the community college system as a whole has moved into this space of online learning that was kind of the founding principle of Calbright. And so what I am always thinking about are finding areas of efficiency so that as a separate entity with what is now a very similar mission with the rest of, frankly, all of public higher education in the state of California is now very focused on distance learning, because that's pretty much all we're doing, for 3 million students is distance learning. Is how do we take this organization, which is dedicated to that, and look at how into the future, what those parallel paths look like. So that's what I'm sort of focused on as I listen to all of you talk about the strategic future, planning for the future.
Thank you. And then Tom.
Well, I read an article last week about the future of work, and I know that California has a future of work commission, and I believe that Calbright is very well positioned to help the state adapt to the future of work, and look forward to seeing it fulfill that role.
Well, thank you, Tom. And to Darius's point, students out there, prospective students, they speak with their feet. It's what they're signing up for. Having more training and continued education is really becoming central to employees being able to figure out what the future of work means for them personally. And so watching and listening to those who are out in the workforce, particularly at the moment when we have historic numbers of unemployment, is also, I think, could be really important.
Well, I want to thank everybody for weighing in and hopefully getting into work mode for this session. We can go to the next slide. And that was a lot of food for thought and inspiration, and very in line with what we're talking about today. So thank you again for all of your responses to the pre-work questions. They were just really rich and provided an incredibly strong jumping off point for today's work. I'll take a few minutes to talk at you, walk through the main themes that emerged from my analysis, and then we'll move into discussion. If you have a clarifying question along the way, please just jump in. I think you've seen these slides before. I'm not going to read them for the most part, but I'll just share a little additional color and context as we go. So next slide, please. So you may remember I asked you, how do you describe Calbright to people who haven't heard of it? And the answers ranged from 4 words to a paragraph. There was a lot of variation in your answers to this question, and I think that probably reflects how new Calbright still is, the changes it's been through already, and your own individual perspectives. The most common themes by far were that Calbright is online, it's for adults or workers, which I think are meant to be the same thing, and focused on jobs for earnings as well as career mobility. And then there were a few other themes that came up more than once, which I've listed here. Many of you directly or indirectly referenced Calbright's public status, usually calling it a community college. And only 2 mentioned affordability, and in between were CBE and how Calbright is new or different. And I provided a few just illustrative examples of some of the different ways this got expressed. The italics, if you're wondering, are for the ones that came up most often where it was relevant. Now the next slide, Denzel, if you don't mind, the next one, there we go, thank you, is who is Calbright for? So I dug into this. This was part of your definitional answers, and I was really struck by this indication, one of many, but this was probably the simplest one to show, of how the board is still converging around a consistent way of talking about Calbright. This is what's underneath that strong theme of being for adults and workers. And the code isn't very complicated. You don't have to count anything, but I used formatting to highlight some of the differences. So references to being adult or bold, to working status or underlined, italic is or underemployed, and gray is not having a degree. So these are the different emphases, sometimes within the same definition, sometimes different, that came through. So really just food for thought. Next slide, please. So when I asked you about your top 3 hopes and top 3 concerns for Calbright, some of you saw them as just flip sides of the same coin, and others had quite different lists, although there was a good deal of overlap across the whole group. So I'll cover hopes first, which yielded 5 distinct themes. Sustainability, not surprisingly, political and financial was the most consistently expressed dominant hope. And given that Calbright has already faced a lot of challenges in the state's fiscal situation, that makes sense. The next was student success. Not just completion, but also jobs with higher pay and career potential in viable sectors. And several of you also pointed out you're especially hopeful that Calbright will lead to success for currently unemployed adults and for those who otherwise wouldn't go to a community college. The next one was about adding value, particularly to the community college system. And I think that's just come up in some of the warm up, especially in terms of sharing knowledge and expertise in effective online learning and supports for adult students, where I think we all know there's still a lot of learning to do for Calbright and others, in delivering CBE and doing alternative scheduling, and what kind of infrastructure is needed to do those things well. You also hope Calbright partners up with more community colleges and puts more students on track for community college degrees. The next theme was innovation and leading innovation. You want to see Calbright build a model and a foundation that leads to broad innovation throughout the state and the system and maybe beyond. The kinds of innovation you have in mind are building a seamless, accessible, end-to-end learner experience online, providing high quality and high value service to the target learners, and demonstrating the effectiveness of a student-centered, market-responsive, and data-informed approach. And I know that sounds kind of jargony, but I think all these terms have real meaning for Calbright and for its intentions and unique role. Then the last theme in this category of hopes is scale. Again, not surprising for a startup board. You hope to see growth in enrollment, completions, and graduates getting good jobs, and in course offerings and in partnerships, including with, but not only with, community colleges. Now we'll go to the main concerns. Next slide, please. So you'll notice parallels here to the last slide and some differences, including that your concerns fell into a narrower range of themes. The first being sustainability. This is the flip side of your top hope. Don't think I need to explain it again. You want it to persist. Organizational effectiveness. Now, this concern was expressed mostly about things like meeting goals, enrolling and delivering for learners, which you could consider as student success, but it came through more as about Calbright's being able to deliver on that. Having a strong and sufficient staff to meet its goals, staying true to Calbright's unique purpose and responsive approach. Someone said, I don't want to be just another campus in the system. We have to be a new kind of statewide entity. Some of you also mentioned making progress towards participatory governance and strengthening student voice. Now, the last theme was around expectations and perceptions. This was really about disconnects in external expectations and perceptions versus what we know to be happening at Calbright and its mandate. Things about learning and building curves, requirements, purpose, what kind of value Calbright is supposed to add and can add, who its target learners are and why they matter, and what kind of cost expectations folks have, both in terms of the money that's being spent now and perceived competition for resources with other institutions, and whether it will deliver at a manageable cost. So those were the concerns. And we're nearly done and can move to discussion because I know there's a lot here. Next slide, please. So I also asked, how would you define success for Calbright over the next 3 years? Some of you said your definition of success was the same as your top hopes, and others went much further. And we're going to go a lot deeper into this topic later in the session. So I'm just going to give the top lines for now. In addition to continued funding and basic sustainability, your definitions all included at least one of these three themes, sometimes all three. Student success, completion, earnings, employment, mobility outcomes, and improving over time. Institutional success. So you know there won't be student success without a strong institution and a value proposition for continued investment. So your definitions of success included meeting the needs of employers as well as other community colleges at a sustainable cost with proof of value to students and to taxpayers. Growth in enrollment offerings and partnerships. And some of you threw out specific numbers, just a few actually. One said 5,000 students. One said 1,000 completions with job placements. Someone said 6 community college partnerships within 3 years. And then the third category of success I'm calling narrative success. And this is because you recognize that success requires taking more control of the narrative about Calbright and its purpose. So what it's done, what it's aiming to do, and how it differs from other colleges, both community colleges and for-profits. And that means gaining recognition and support for Calbright's unique role and value by addressing concerns, correcting misperceptions, setting expectations, and demonstrating impact. I am now going to stop talking at you and we're going to move to questions and discussion. My hope is that this gives us a good starting point. If folks don't already have things they want to say, I have some prompts to get going, but let's see where you are first. And it may be helpful to signal in the chat if, as Tom said, if we have a lot of folks who want to talk at once, but let's start first with just opening up the floor.
Are we able to take the slide so we can, I can't see everybody's face with the slide up. It won't let me switch.
There should be, we could take the slide down, Denzel, maybe, but you can also, there's a little line to the left of the faces between that and the slide. You can move that over and make the slide really small.
Yeah, that's better. Yeah.
Okay, thanks, Denzel. All right, now I can see everybody. Would you guys like a prompt? I'll throw one out. Any surprises or something that made you wonder or reflect?
Lauren, I'll make a comment there. So
okay.
I guess I was surprised when we were talking about who is Calbright for, that we didn't mention as much learners left behind by other sources. And I thought that that was one of if not the genesis of Calbright, was to capture folks that didn't have the chance to finish the trajectory that they hoped they would be on. So I guess I was surprised by that lack of focus. And I'm also wondering if, considering those folks' financial stability and financial literacy, given that they're probably in debt, a ton of money, is part of the mission that Calbright should pursue. That it's not just financial stability for the organization itself, it's also financial stability and then economic mobility for the learners themselves.
I'm going to jump in and exercise a little prerogative on that too. I think I was actually surprised, and I think it's because for many of us it's implicit and we live it and we breathe it. But there was not explicit mention of some of the dimensions of that working learner community, right? Not a specific conversation around equity, around what communities we mean when we say working learners, and I hope that we get that in today's discussion a bit more contextualized, because it feels very important that that also feature in our definitions of success and in the way that we measure ourselves going forward.
If I can, Judah, I was struck by that too, because as you'll recall, when we were thinking about this conceptually before it was in the budget, one of the largest populations that were identified at the time were Latinas who are in their 40s or not. And to Hildy's point, people who had started some sort of educational program, but for a variety of reasons did not complete. And we certainly had a focus, and I think in some ways it'll inform the program design if we know kind of the types of students that we're serve.
I actually was wondering about equity. Oh, sorry, please go ahead. Is that Joseph?
Yeah, I'll jump in. First, I just want to acknowledge and appreciate all of the work that has gone into bringing Calbright to the place that it's at. And it's been a tremendous undertaking. And so you all have done a great job. And so, my context is, being on a local board going on about 8 years now. What I would like to see, from Calbright is that just imagine creating a product that makes every district say that I want the Calbright brand on or in my district to run my online program. Because if we just create another college, then, I think we miss an opportunity. I think we have an opportunity to make something that's recognized throughout the whole state. And so if the product was so great that my district says, well, I want Calbright to run my online program, or I want that brand, at my campuses, I think we would really be achieving all of the things that folks are saying. And so I think it should be large. It should cover the whole state, and ideally Calbright is at every campus. I'm not talking about in a mandated kind of way. I'm saying like that it's so good that campuses are asking for it.
I'll add to what Joseph just said. One of the things that I am most hopeful for Calbright is it's going to illuminate the disparities we have already existing within our system and help us streamline some of the processes that have become obstacles to these students. Not just those that are now pursuing Calbright, but those who have otherwise been left out of the system because they don't know how to navigate our processes.
So this is Pam. I'm going to build on every single observation that has been rendered. And one of the things that we haven't, or we have talked about it is the issues around who our students are and who our likely students would be, and what it is that they need. And part of this this experiment is about creating flexibility, not only mobility, but creating flexibility so that students can learn, one, at their own pace, but that it is a system in which they can create the time that they need in order to do the work. And that's critical. And I think that's critically important because when we think of our students and we talk about them being adults, most of our students don't fall in the ages of 18 to 20. They fall in the ages of 20 to 35, 35 and even close to 40. And those are the adults, both in our system and outside of our system, that need that flexibility to need something that is competency based and is not determined of how much time in a seat. And so as we're building this, we have to continue to keep that in mind. It really is looking at who they are, what they are doing. And I think the pandemic, and the other observation I'll make, I think that the pandemic has made it laser focused. Who's been dislocated, who's been impacted by, in terms of large numbers, who's been impacted by COVID, both health-wise, but then also work-wise, and what those industries are that dislocation is happening, and what those industries are in which there are jobs that are available or could be available as a result of need. And it is that. And what we need is that ability to pivot expeditiously in order to meet that demand.
I want to, Pam, build on what you said and sort of, to me, sum up what I believe. It's just we want to create a system that follows the learners as opposed to a system that the learners have to follow, in essence.
This is Darius. I want to, first of all, say that, I think the transition on staff has been really solid. And I think, our mission is really strong. The fear that I have in the planning and the way that we're describing this, we keep talking about 3 to 5 years. And I think Tom alluded to this when he started. My fear is that within the legislature and the people that are pulling or in control of our purse strings, I think in their mind, they don't have a 3-year time frame. And I think from the staff standpoint, and I think that all of us, we have to understand that, there are those opponents that have been opposed to the online college from the very beginning. And we have to figure out a time frame that's going to meet the needs of the Phil Pings, the Nancy Skinners, and so forth. And, even with the governor defending us the way he did, there is still more opposition than I would like to see around our general premise in the legislature.
I'm going to throw in something here. It's a little different. One thing that we discovered with our change of leadership is that students were getting caught in the essentials course, and it was proving difficult to evaluate kind of where they were in their skill set and how they were able to then take on the substantive coursework that we wanted them to do. And that system has been transformed by the new regime of staff there, which is a good thing. But I think it's vitally important that we really focus on identifying the skills, the prior learning, the capabilities of these students and these learners, and helping them. They're all going to be different. They're all going to have unique needs, and helping them with those needs, while at the same time making sure they are in the substantive course that they signed up for, and that they're making progress toward achieving the certificate that they want to get. So it's a difficult balance, but we have to do both, and we have to keep the light at the end of the tunnel shining brightly, while we also make sure that that whatever additional assistance they need is provided.
I'll jump in and add a couple thoughts here. I agree with everything I've heard so far. One of the main things for me has been removing every possible barrier that our students may have been experiencing that we weren't aware of. And it kind of, as I've thought about it over the past few months, has been getting back to a premise we had when we started out, which was we need to be radically student focused in order to do that. And in addition to being radically student focused, we also need to be radically focused on the needs of the hiring managers to be able to make the transformation in these students' lives possible, right? And so I think we're on the right track with it. We probably still have some ways to go, but I'm really encouraged by the fact that we're learning so much about some of these unintentional barriers that our students have been facing, and that we're able to call them out and work on addressing them.
It's Kevin. It seems to me that we can speculate about things and we can imagine the way we want the school to be, but at some point we're going to need the students/workers feedback. Have the courses work for you? So we're at the nascent stage of all of this, and we as the board are trying to figure out the best way to proceed, and we're doing a good job on that. But I think ultimately the feedback from the students is going to be absolutely critical. And I'm just wondering, have we gotten any type of feedback yet from any of our students?
Yeah, I'll take that one just to respond. And then I'll also talk about how we're thinking about it going forward. So, there's been a pretty continuous process, at least since the since I started, to really look at and analyze what was happening in the student experience. And that included not just kind of passive survey, but a real analytical understanding of what was or was not happening with students in terms of progression. And that was important because that, along with the survey work that we did with students in the post-COVID survey, and other ways in which we have stepped up actual contact with students, that informs our understanding of what's been difficult about the process for them. And it's also translated in other things, as Tom mentioned, kind of this understanding that we needed to look at barriers that students were experiencing in this essential course and find ways of supporting and guiding them through into their skills content. That became a focal point largely because of what we were seeing happening to students and what we were hearing from students. And I think the other piece of that going forward is, and to thread together something that Bill brought up, which is the perspective of what it takes to be job ready, to be able to perform in the job that you're in, requires us from the standpoint of the program activity and the curriculum and the supports that we build to be able to translate. And so in the new pathway design that we're exploring with an employer, which hopefully we'll be able to share soon, what we're actually looking at is how we take some of the frontline workers who are actually performing some of these job tasks as a way of helping drive a whole opportunity to design a program that allows us to provide that validated assurance that somebody coming through our program will actually be job ready. So, calibrating a lot of the labor market information we look at and a lot of the information and data that we have that's been passive or untimed or hasn't really come together to bridge some of those gaps that we see into that translation, and really being able to hold space for the prospective learner. So not just learners that are in our institutions now, but workers who are on the front lines of these activities, that will allow us to actually design programs that are suited for them. So I think those two things are a part of not just point in time feedback from students, but cultivating an ongoing understanding of what individuals in communities are needing, particularly workers in our communities.
This is Cullen Fitzgerald. I just wanted to make a point. I actually think that Board Member Anderson and Board Member Hall's points are slightly intertwined. I think that obviously it's no surprise that there's still a large portion of members of both the California Community College system, the state legislature, who have not bought into Calbright's vision. Because of previous administration or what have you. And like Board Member Hall said, I think that a large part of that is about the feedback that we're getting, both from students and from staff, and how we're using that feedback. I think pretty early on, one of my concerns was that the California Community College perspective itself wasn't also prevalent in the decision-making processes of the institution. And I think that maybe some of that, not all, but some of that lack of support stems from, faculty or from students who were not included in some of the initial discussions around where Calbright should go. And I think that one thing that we can do to remedy that, and one thing Calbright has already done and is going in the right direction, I hope we continue to go, is getting that feedback and getting that perspective. Empowering the constituencies of the California community colleges, intertwining Calbright's work with different institutions. I think one of the most successful things we've done was the Bakersfield College Partnership. And I heard earlier, there was someone said that there should be a goal of having 5 community college partnerships or something like that in 3 years. So I think these are the types of things that will regain our reputation, providing constituencies with a foundation to make their voices heard and steer Calbright to a more focused direction like that.
Lauren, this is Amy. There's one other thing that was that stuck out to me in the responses that people have talked clearly a lot about the sustainability of Calbright, kind of in the more global state budgetary sense. But the other thing is, and I think people have kind of intimated this, is that it's a public institution and that the cost to students needs to be low to minimal. and that it really was a direct reaction to some of the for-profit boot camps and other institutions, that are in this space, that are not equitable because they're not providing, really low-cost options. And the idea is that the state is subsidizing this as we do our other public education endeavors, to keep the cost, low for students so that they can participate and get on a different career trajectory for themselves.
And Lauren, this is Darius. I have a question again, and maybe staff can address this too, but the best, asset we have when we advocate is things like the voices of the students. When they go to Sacramento or they meet with their legislature, they talk about how effective the system is and the value it's brought to me as an individual. When you look at the online college, how are we going to mobilize that? It's an older constituency. They're traditionally not as engaged as younger folk are in the system. And how are we going to use them to be a voice to advocate for themselves and others that may want to follow in their footsteps?
Lauren, this is Hildy. I think what we have learned from the students in the time of COVID are two things. One was Calbright's proactivity and the success of that proactivity in really building a repository of technological devices and making sure that that was something that we did from the outset before any of this happened, because we recognized that technology was going to be an issue. But the second thing that we haven't really devoted attention to is the space for learning. And I think COVID has highlighted that the actual physical space actually represents a lot of equity and psychological safety issues. And if we're supposed to be online, we kind of assume away that issue, but I don't think it's safe to assume it away given what we've learned from COVID.
Hildy, it's Kevin. What do you mean by that? I'm not following what you're saying about the physical space.
Sure. Students can't always stay at home to learn. It's not the safest space to be. They might not have the space to learn from their cars. If we're talking about students who may have housing insecurity, online might not be the best place for them. So how are we capturing that challenge?
Oh, you mean like for the student? I mean, I think there's just some students, Calbright, they're not going to be Calbright customers, because there are some students that, they just don't learn that way. And, have we done a segmentation of who the ideal student is? Do we have a profile of that?
Yeah, actually, we can circulate more of that around. We're going through that analysis right now, but there's slightly disconnected response, but there's a fair amount we understand about who the focused population is that falls into the sort of direction of the statute, and we've done a lot of research and market study on those prospective learners, what their needs might be, technology being some aspect of that, obviously in an online, but for many of them, we're not going to be able to solve every dimension of every barrier that they face. And what we find is that when we learn authentically about different communities, we know that even if we solve for 30% of those things, we dramatically increase the likelihood of their engagement with us and their success with us. And I think that's sometimes a different way to look at student services or how we provide supports. How much easier we can make it for somebody to really access that opportunity with all of the things that they're already juggling, without getting, I think, too far afield into the category of things that would be, really difficult and beyond our control to address out of the gate. And so, device access became something that was critically important, and device and Wi-Fi access. And so, that continued to be on the front lines of what we pushed and supported on the services side. I think, the larger structural questions in our state about housing insecurity and food insecurity and some of these other things, I think the solutions in that space are much more collaboratively designed with what we see happening in communities. So, I'll highlight something like the Compton partnership that we're doing. Part of the need for the Compton partnership came out of a conversation that I had with Keith Curry, the president there, about the difficulty of work that they were doing in community in adult basic education and the sort of inability for that to translate to enrollments at Compton College. And that gap, they saw an opportunity to build through with Calbright students, right? So being able to have these in-community relationships that they had bridged through an experience and a credential that gave people the opportunity to then step to something higher division level at the college. So those are the types of approaches, and I think this is going to be true on the workforce side. I actually, Joseph, in follow-up to a conversation we had, I was able to meet with the executive director of San Bernardino, the new workforce head there, and it was an interesting conversation there as well, because here we're looking at what's in a community and sort of where the gaps are. And so some of the point of service delivery happens with the San Bernardino Workforce Board and the AJCCs. And they're kind of thinking about what our role might be relative to supporting some of the gaps in services that prevent us from, or prevent somebody from moving beyond receiving unemployment insurance and actually accessing a type of program that could meet with the volatility and the instability in their life in a time frame that would allow them to get a new job or to create space for more education or training to occur. So these are really community-centered solutions, and what our institution's role is going to need to be is to understand not how to create every single aspect of those services. Much of that infrastructure already exists, but where we can add value to that and where there's a gap in what students are experiencing that prevents them from accessing it or prevents them from taking that step forward. And that's, when we talk about innovation, it's not just the technology, it is all of the challenges surrounding that. And again, like I think and I hear it in all of what you're saying, the idea around collaboration is not just partnerships with community colleges. It is understanding, how those types of partnerships and other partnerships like workforce boards or other parts of that infrastructure are going to be the right partners for solving something that we see as a core population need that's being underserved right now. And I think we have a hard time moving away from the institutional perspective to get to that sometimes, but I do think it's important when we think about it.
Y'all mind if I just say one more thing? I think it's really important for Calbright to really be clear about the sandbox that it's going to play in, because someone else made a comment about the legislator, and we need to really be clear with them about what Calbright can accomplish and what's out of bounds, because we're not going to be able to be everything to everybody. And whether it be 3 years, 5 years, 10 years, but for whatever that time period is, be very clear about this is who we're trying to serve and what we're trying to accomplish, and just run as hard as possible towards that. Because I think we do have a very, very unique opportunity in that this is set up. And so it's just all about being focused and just being unapologetically, like, we can't be everything to everybody with this. It's just not enough resources to do it. And $20 million in the state, isn't that what the budget was set up for this? You're not going to be able to serve homeless students and people with some college and people with no computers. Real focus and just, run as hard as we can to it. And I think you also have an opportunity, or we have an opportunity, not to be restricted by some of the things that hold traditional campuses back. Like, employers want to see us turn around curriculum way faster. And I think they're so, my company, we're investing $1 million to create a pre-apprenticeship program, and we should be working with the community colleges, but it takes them too long to come up with the curriculum. And so they don't want to wait. They don't want to wait. And so this is a lab opportunity for us if we can focus.
Yeah.
Other comments?
Just everything that Joseph just said. Underscore, clap, whatever emoji I have. Agree.
I am not an expert on the emojis available, but I think there's a clapping one. I'm sensing a lull. That was a really, one thing I love is I didn't have to call on anybody. You guys are in it, and that is terrific. Would it be helpful for me to reflect back a little bit of what I was hearing? Okay, I see some nodding. I think there was, a strong reinforcement of the importance of Calbright serving students, following students, being student-centered, really addressing the material and other needs they have to be successful learners. Of a competitive, increasingly competitive environment or perceived competition in terms of the move to online generally, and how Calbright's going to distinguish itself and reinforce its unique role and value add and zero in. And I think that's part of what we're here talking about today, are some of those possibilities around where Calbright may find that that success in line with its mission and the progress that it's already making. There's some discussion about students, how to make sure that students are being heard both internally in terms of serving them effectively and externally as representatives of the institution, the challenges in doing that in a diffuse community, and the need to be responsive and flexible and agile, although the word wasn't used, and to preserve that ability to really meet the needs of both students and employers as changes happen. Does that resonate with folks? Did I miss something?
I thought there was, I don't know how to encapsulate it, but there was also a point made about creating a brand that all of the community colleges desire. It's part of distinguishing ourselves, but I think it's important to make ourselves, not just palatable, but something everyone wants to join in on. And then to paraphrase what Joseph said, it goes at both levels. There's sort of a need for speed in terms of the setting up of the curriculum and our ability to demonstrate success, so that we meet the challenges posed by some of the skepticism at the state level.
Yep. I think this is very continuous with what I heard from you before, but as I hope, really building on it in terms of where you're feeling like the conversation needs to go. Any other thoughts? Any thoughts about how this connects back to the board's role?
Can I say something first?
Please.
On Joseph's point, we need to walk a fine line, don't we, as to how we keep Calbright as a Calbright entity, as opposed to incorporating into each community college. I mean, it sounds good, but I do think we wear separate hats. We're Calbright, and we don't want pushback from the community colleges saying you're stepping on our toes, you're interfering with our curriculums. So I think we need to keep that in mind.
So can I speak to that just for a half second? And that is that Calbright was actually formed to provide online competency-based education, because that is where we need to head, and our community colleges have not really headed in that direction. We have probably one, two, maybe three examples out of 115 examples outside of Calbright that have done anything close to that. And that's actually where we as community colleges need to go. And so part of this, and it was there's this research piece of Calbright that our community colleges don't have the resources to actually do in this issue, in this space of work, and where it's going and where it's headed. And we are not agile. And I don't even know that we can get agile fast enough. But part of this is, in that space, we need to make certain that we are speaking we are one college, but that we are speaking to all the others, that we are sharing, that we are in partnership, that there is connection. I believe that there are those on our campuses that want that, because in our next Board of Governors meeting, we're going to be doing a regulation, Title V, I think it's Title V, regulation on competency-based education. And so we're not working at cross purposes. We're working in trying to make alignments on where we need to go as a system. And we're doing this work to inform where we need to go.
Yeah, and Kevin, and I'm not suggesting that we should mandate anything. I'm saying from a service standpoint, when you think about the amount of money that districts contract out for consulting services just because they don't have the internal capacity, if Calbright saw the districts as a customer and had the ability to create products that they wanted to subscribe to or purchase, almost like, if we treat them like a customer and we're designing things that they need, they'll come to us and say, we need this. They'll send their faculty to us for training. That's what I'm saying. Not that we would mandate anything or say, you got to do this. I'm saying design things that they need and then they come to us. It's a theoretical example. I'm not saying it's going to be easy. I'm just saying, well, what if that's what we did, what would be the impact? That's what I'm saying.
I'd love to add a little bit of concreteness to sort of to that concepting. I wouldn't use maybe the same words, but I would say, like, we already have been starting these conversations with a number of different districts in the system. And what's emerged from those conversations has been an identification of what Joseph is talking about. There's some aspects of this work, even as the system decides it wants to transition to competency-based education and wants to be more responsive and wants to have greater innovation capacity, to actually getting that done. And the conversation that I've had with now 4 large districts in the system, and we're going to talk a little bit about this from the perspective of adult learners at the CCLC conference later this week, is around this question. So, we're organized in this regional structure. It aligns to the workforce system. We have regional consortia of community colleges, and now we have content migrating to very conventional versions of online that I'm gonna say are very difficult to execute on. And so when we take that next step and start to create some of the enabling conditions for other institutions in the system to take these steps towards competency-based education, it is going to require so much working together, so much shared learnings, and so much exposure that our system institutions are not comfortable with typically, right? To be able to have space to sort of try things out and to be able to systematically assess what is or is not working for students, be able to talk about that very openly, and to be able to pivot and change. We always hide behind, process or procedures or governance or other things, and most of those conversations don't surface to the level that they need to actually make progress on the implementation of very high quality competency-based education things. So that, when I bring that down to the role that we are so thinking about playing, and how that is informed, Joseph, to your point of from the difficulties that different institutions are facing, from the opportunities they want to see in terms of evolving their own work, that is where the sweet spot will be in terms of really being able to have distinctive activities that we do as Calbright College that are on the frontier of a lot of that experimentation, and supporting the system through that experimentation as we get to advancing more competency-based education throughout. So I don't think this thing that keeps coming up on duplication, the way that people keep talking about it, I feel like is a little bit misguided. I mean, what we should be really saying is, distinctive value that the college provides, both in terms of its programmatic offerings, but also its offerings to the rest of the system.
I'm just going to jump in here and say that unfortunately we've had such a rich conversation that we're cutting into our break time, and I want to make sure we get to the SWOT because I think this flows directly into those questions of strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. We've just been talking about opportunity. If you have other thoughts, I think there'll be more time to come back to them, and they will still be relevant. But we're going to move to the next slide, which is if Denzel, can you share the next slide? Thanks. So can I ask for a quick show of hands of how many folks have done a SWOT exercise before? So of those with the screen on, a lot of you. Then I'll try and be very brief about the orientation. It's a simple tool. It helps build a sort of clearer shared picture of assets and challenges for an organization, internal and externally, from the perspective of those who are doing it. There are these 4 quadrants representing the acronym SWOT. And we're really looking at what is its strengths, internal strengths. What does Calbright do well? What are its advantages compared to other career-oriented providers, public or private? How is it unique? On weaknesses, what are Calbright's internal challenges and limitations, and where do others have an advantage? On opportunities, what are ways Calbright could take advantage of its strengths to succeed? And these can be current or potential opportunities, but trying to look within the presumed next 3 years. And then threats are external. What could happen or is happening externally that could make it harder for Calbright to succeed? And we're going to do this dynamically. It's an experiment. We're going to switch to a different version of what you're seeing here. That's a live document where I'm going to try and summarize your answers and fill in the boxes as we go so that you can all see it at the same time. So we're going to start with strengths. And Denzel, if you can switch to the shared doc. And we'll see how this works. Okay, so I'm going to be looking at my screen to a certain degree while you guys are talking. Can everybody see the 4 boxes? Okay, and when I type ABC in the upper left corner, can you see that? All right, thank you again for your forbearance and to Denzel for helping us figure this out. So I'm going to suggest we see if we can go like we have so far. Folks can take themselves off mute. We're going to start with strengths. Like I said, I'm going to try and roll them up to relatively short expressions that will fit in these boxes. But from the conversations we've all been having, I think you've identified quite a few. I didn't want to preload it because I wanted to see where the conversation took us. Please, somebody jump in with the strengths. Remember, these are about internal strengths.
I'd say our leadership team.
Okay.
Yeah, I think our executive team administratively, but also our board, I think is both are very strong and really understand what's going on.
I think a clear focus in terms of our mission.
Okay, and if I'm not getting it right as I type, let me know.
I'd say there's, and this ties in with the first 2 points, but we have a true desire to accomplish great things.
Okay.
This is Jolena. I'd say one of our greatest strengths is the fact that we don't have a history and we are not tied to processes because we've always done it that way.
Okay. We don't have to fill every box to the rim, by the way, but I think there's probably going to be more than we even have room for. So keep going.
I think we're building it, but our faculty is going to be the greatest strength to get this up and running. We're beginning that process now. So that's pretty exciting.
I think that we have the capacity to be flexible and agile.
And with that, I think we are forward thinking.
And to add to this is like opportunity to innovate.
Sorry, Yulia, could you say that again? The opportunity to innovate?
Yes.
think about what we do well, advantages compared to others, and how you're unique. Anything else folks want to throw in?
We also have the luxury, is not the right word, but it's nice that we have the ability to scale. It's a little bit what Jolena said, but slightly differently.
Okay.
I think we're building a research and data analysis capability that's going to be very valuable and unique in the system.
I was going to write R&D.
Research and data analysis.
Okay. I'm not used to having people see how badly I type. I've got my computer up high, so my face isn't in the wrong spot. Okay. Are these are all different kinds. A lot of them are different sort of angles on similar things, which makes sense. Anything else that you feel like is missing from here? We can come back to it at the end. Or should we move on to
Lauren? Can I just
yes,
squeeze
Hildy.
one last one in? I think we are built to develop those partnerships. That's part of our genesis, part of our thread, part of our structure.
Mm-hmm. So to collaborate, is that?
Yeah.
I actually want to ask a question here about, I know clear focus and mission is important and covers a lot of ground. What about your target learners? Is that a strength, having target learners? It's a real question, not rhetorical.
So I would say absolutely. Our state is changing exponentially. And our target learners are those who may have accessed education, may have accessed training. They tend to be, they will tend to be students of color or adults of color. And if we look at the demographics of the state, we have to be focusing on them because right now, in many respects, they're unemployed, underemployed. They are impacted by dislocation of industries and the work that they're doing. And they're in jobs that are low pay, no benefits, and in many cases, no career ladder. So absolutely, this is why we're built. All of those things are for that population.
And I would add to that a little bit, actually. So I think we generally know who they are, but as a strength, but I think as one of our weaknesses is we don't always know what they need in order to have that transformative experience, right? So I think the target learners are both a strength and a weakness. We have a strength in one area, but we have a weakness in another.
So have I reflected that here? We know who we're built to serve, and we're still learning what target learners need.
Yeah, I mean, I was going to say that our actual students, that the folks that are starting the cohort is a real strength, and learn, and then like our ability to actually learn from them, and take what they are experiencing, and you know, making adaptations to address the challenges they faced. I was going to put like the targeted learner population in the opportunity section of the SWOT. That's where I kind of thought they belonged, and I think the actual students we're serving already, the cohorts that we're serving already, felt like the strength to me.
Say more about what what we're learning from the current cohort, what we're delivering to them.
Yeah, and then I mean, I think they're going to be our greatest ambassadors. You know, to Darius's point earlier, in helping to show that this is something that actually works, and they're going to be able to help us educate a lot of others about the value of Calbright. So.
And on opportunities, you're saying, and we'll come back to this, but the population is large.
It's large. I mean, I think that it's hungry. The folks who are in this population are hungry to move up the economic ladder for themselves, for their families, for their communities. They need that opportunity. They need to know that Calbright is that opportunity for them.
Okay.
On internal weaknesses, I think we're still doing a little bit of making up for lost ground, our bumpy start. We certainly have excellent leadership in place, but that did honestly, slow us down a bit.
Mm-hmm. I'm happy. Why don't we shift over to weaknesses, and if other things come to mind you want to put back in strengths, you can. Nothing is locked in here. This is an exercise. As Tom said, we're not making decisions. So this is just to get more thoughts out to inform this process. Other weaknesses, internal.
This is Darius. I would just say the numbers, the volume, because when you hear the critics talk about, what we're doing and where we're at, they always come up with the fact that, they've invested X number of dollars and there's very few students actually in the program.
Mm-hmm.
This is Jolena. The one weakness that I see is the fact that we are navigating new ground that previously has only been traveled by proprietary for-profit institutions. So trying to do this on the non-credit side at the public dime is really quite the challenge internally.
Building on building on what Darius said, I just want to add that the low numbers of students is part of a problem we have basically with the expectations game. I mean, people who are our critics in particular don't recognize that this is a startup, and it takes a lot of. Now I put this under weaknesses. Is that that we don't well, maybe it could be a threat. Okay, never mind. There's unrealistic expectations that that we should have accomplished more than we have. I mean, we were given a 7-year startup period for a reason, and critics are honing in on, well, what have you done in the first 9 months? And it's just not realistic to think that we could accomplish as much as some of them seem to think we should. So that's problematic.
And let me this is Darius, let me add on what Tom just said. When you listen to them, what they argue is not that there isn't a viable mission that we're trying to accomplish. They argue that they can, at the local level or whoever the constituency is, they can have a bigger impact in a more rapid time period than we can. So if you want to get bang for your buck, give it to us. Don't give it to them.
I've just put this in threats. Is that fair, Darius, what you're saying? Believe that others can deliver sooner, cheaper?
Yeah, and I do believe in, again, talking to some of the power players that have an influence over us, that's going to be the biggest challenge. And I think, Amy may have alluded to it in the past. Their issue is going to be to nickel and dime us over the next year or two. Take a little bit away now, take a little bit, and we're going to implode upon ourselves because they will just, set us up for failure.
Yeah, I think you're going there, Lauren, but budget. I mean, we already have a budgetary deficit. We're clearly in a recession. And so a threat will be as kind of the newer program, and budgetary constraints. New programs are always, I think, more vulnerable, because of, just constrained resources.
Can I add a opportunity based on those three things? I think it's an opportunity for us to create a story map and some talking points for us as board members, so that we can all be on message about what we've accomplished to date and where we are still going. I think it's also an opportunity in philanthropy, and then also corporate philanthropy. A lot of folks are really frustrated with the system, and they could be, helping make up some of the gaps that we have in terms of funding if, we're able to really tell the story of, what we've accomplished and where we're going. But again, we got to be nimble in order to capture those dollars. So a story map we need for the board with some clear talking points.
So I'm putting that in weaknesses, that the board needs a clearer story to tell.
Okay. Yeah. Now I was just saying it was
that fair?
Yeah, I was just saying it's an opportunity to develop that, but long as that's
Correct.
captured. Yeah.
I think it's an internal but that it has value externally.
Right. And I would add that also Calbright needs to make certain, we talked about partnerships and collaboration someplace, but we need to expand that partnership and collaboration into statewide advocacy on behalf of the work that Calbright is doing among local organizations that really see a benefit to depressed communities that really need to have this particular option available to folks that live within those communities. So I think yes, there is absolutely members in the legislature that don't see a need, don't understand the need, and are going to try to nickel and dime Calbright. But there is an argument to be made that right now, more than ever, the need for a Calbright is absolutely necessary. I think what has been said by Joe and having that story, and then having folks in communities and our students talk about what the benefits are is going to be critically important as well in this discussion of budget.
So Pam, I put these all into one opportunity. Maybe that's too much, but is that am I capturing what you're saying?
Yes.
I think under threats, external threats, I mean, there's a lot of misinformation, right? Which may, in fact, be contributing to the low number of students, or the loss of ground. I think making sure that our constituents and our elected officials understand what the role of Calbright is in order for them to be able to support us, so we are not dealing with all these problems that are going to make it even tougher for us to be successful quicker.
Mm-hmm.
In terms of also external, I would call it a threat, but a challenge is also, we're trying to reach a student base that is non-traditional, typically not engaged in any of these processes. So it's a heavier lift than almost any other, similar entity.
So weakness is a judgy word. It just, SWOT is such a familiar framework that I left it, but I think it goes there, and that it's an internal challenge to reaching target learners.
Right. I do not oppose that. That box. I'm fine being
Lorna,
in that.
if I could add.
Please.
Go ahead, Jennifer.
I'm good.
I think that I may be looking at this optimistically, but the fact that we are building an organization during the time of the greatest challenge, I think it could be a strength for us. I don't think anyone really understood the depths of the problem we would be in right now. So if we are able to pull this off, it would be amazing, because I can't think of a bigger problem that we could go through. But at the same time, that also expands the amount of students that we would potentially be trying to reach. So our student base has probably grown substantially.
Growing.
And this is Darius. I always look for, third-party advocates. Obviously, the staff and the board have a vested interest because all of us have been there from the beginning. I'm still not, I don't see a third-party constituency that's going to step up and say, hey, we love Calbright. Here's what we need to do. And I think, for effective advocacy, you either have a student group, you have a teacher group, you have business community. And because of the fits and starts we've had, that third party group has not really gelled. And I think the sooner that we can get a avid third party that can really fight along with us for continued growth and expansion over a 3-year period, it's important.
So
You know,
can you say a little,
We
sorry.
haven't talked enough about our employers. That's another opportunity, is to engage our employers as advocates for Calbright.
Right, Jen, and I agree with that as long as it works. Because if an employer does not have a good experience,
Yeah.
and for whatever reason, it could actually be a reverse. It can either be the best thing or the worst thing for us, because that's just one more person taking a pot shot at us.
No, I wasn't planning on reaching out to disgruntled employers.
I've got a couple
as a-
weaknesses, but I wanted to call out actually the fact that the Lieutenant Governor has a hand raised, and I wanted to make sure that she had a chance to jump in if she wanted to.
Thank you. Sorry, I couldn't see that.
Thank you. So I had a couple of things I wanted to suggest under opportunities. It seems to me that the focus on the computer science courses and programming is a real opportunity for us, because to have excellence in CS is something that can fill a gap with community college programs. It's not easy to develop that curriculum. And so putting that front and center of our curriculum, I think, can be a great opportunity. The second thing I see as a strength, if there's room to put it on there, but I think it's a really substantial, important, and also differentiating strength, is the use of flexible start times and finish times. That again is a differentiating factor from the rest of the system, that you can start a class, take the courses, and finish it at your own pace. So I think it's important, again, in both of these cases, to point out how Calbright fills the gaps or offers something different from the rest of the system. And then just kind of to support the realistic kind of threats that Darius Anderson has raised, and it's real and sobering. And I do agree that part of our process is going to be to address them. And I think that in terms of maybe actually not a threat, but more of a weakness, is just, well, no, maybe a threat, that these programs are seen as duplicative.
Thank you so much. May I ask if you think that the two I've just highlighted that you suggested as opportunities, which I think they are they more internal or external? Is it that there's a growing need that we can meet, or that it's a strength Calbright already has in both of these cases?
Well, it seems to me it's the strength we already have.
Okay.
But I think that continuing to talk about these is extremely important in the context of the legislature asking this fundamental question: do we need Calbright when the rest of the community college system is going online? What is special about this now? At the concept of Calbright was we should have online education to supplement a community college system that is largely in-person learning. If the 2.1 million students of the community college system are online, what does that mean for Calbright? And so when I, in the briefings I've had, and also frankly, just going through the website, it seems to me these are the things that we highlight. We have to continue to highlight the fact that you can start whenever you want, take the courses whenever you want, finish at your own pace. That is a differentiating factor. I believe that is still true. And again, this focus on computer science, finding professors and teachers, educators in community, in computer science isn't easy. So developing, since we have started putting those courses at the center, it seems to me that either evaluate whether or not that's still the case. But again, from what I hear in talking to student learners at the CSU and the UC and meeting with groups that are concerned about the future of work and what it means for them personally, if we can continue to sharpen that focus and beef up the opportunities in those particular sectors, seems to me to be an opportunity.
Thank you. So I've got that. Does this opportunity look right to you? Can you see? So I've just run up against the fact that we've filled these boxes so well that they don't all fit on one page.
Yeah, but I guess the reason that I think of it as the opportunity is that, again, in the context of the fact that we are in a position of needing to continue to advocate for Calbright and show what it is that we have to offer. And so it's a work in progress that I think I guess what I would say is these are strengths that need to be the basis of advancing growth and strengthening the Calbright program as a whole. I mean, we have continually going back to these very basic elements that make Calbright different and necessary and needed. That to me is really instrumental in terms of making the case for, what Darius pointed out, this very high per pupil cost of delivering this education.
Yeah. I think those are some very essential questions that we, should be able to answer at some point in time. One of the questions that I wanted to ask to explore as an opportunity is, are mayors and county administrative officers or supervisors an ally for us? So cities get economic development dollars kind of based on the discretionary income that their residents have, and more education kind of is one of the indicators. And so if we were able to get those local municipalities to help us identify residents with some college that want to complete their degrees, and our districts have struggled with it because we rely heavily on K-12 for our incoming students, but partnering with cities in a way, I wonder if that would be an opportunity. And so we'd just like, to be able to explore that in the future to see if that's a place. But I wonder if we could also train faculty, like to answer one of the questions that the LT asks is, because Calbright can develop curricula faster, or the theory is, can we build the capacity of districts to provide online learning? Because right now what we're finding is there's a lot of equity issues with the online classes. Not all classes are built the same based on the skill of a faculty member. And so the online learning on campuses is really all over the place right now. And so can Calbright help standardize and bring it to at least a level that we can say that all students have the same opportunity in these online classes? Because I think the gamut is all over the place in terms of the quality of instruction that's being provided online right now.
Can I friendly amendment that one, maybe, Joseph, which is, I think we keep saying online, but there's quite a distinction between conventional online and this move that we want, that the system is heading towards skills-based, competency-based education. And I think, the OEI and the CVC and the system efforts around online have been, continually evolving. And, I think they're doing well in helping folks transition to that conventional online look. But when we talk about the degree of complexity that's associated with like trying to get high quality CBE. And we're finding this in real time too, as much of our faculty in our institution has come from the system, and we're excited about that. And it has also been helpful because they're starting to go through competency-based education training and some of these other resources that kind of are emerging as resources, mainly because we're kind of going through that process now in terms of ensuring all of our faculty have access to the training that they need to produce high quality CBE content and to learn that distinctive delivery model. So I definitely can see us and our faculty in particular being leaders in this space, and we're doing the work right now to position ourselves for that.
Could we be like the gold star issuer? Like if you've gone through the Calbright accreditation process, you get a gold star, and it's the thing to do.
I think I would say we are aiming and we are working towards designing best in class quality CBE work and all of the pieces that go into that. The way teaching and learning is different. The way that roles that individual faculty take on relative to the production of CBE programs is different. And the training associated that, the focus on adult learners, all of that stuff is quite new and distinctive. And so we're, our work with the Competency-Based Education Network, which is really the field standard bearer on this work, is designed to get us there. And the hope is getting us there is something that we can offer in expanded fashion also to other folks in the system that are interested. So, I love seeing the energy around this in the system, largely because I think there's an opportunity for us to not make a lot of the implementation mistakes that other folks in other parts of the country have made in trying to deliver this policy. It's just to want to do it and to say we're doing it doesn't mean we're all kind of, it takes a lot to get there.
Guys, again, time check. So I'm gonna adjust this, if it's all right with everyone, to provide the model for system. Is that what we're talking about? Is the opportunity for the next 3 years?
Can I add one maybe wrap up point? Is that it gets back to the Lieutenant Governor's point. It gets back to Darius's point. It gets back to Joseph's point. I think we need to articulate clearly and succinctly what Calbright is. And it might get back to this talking points issue. First, as a board, and this is almost a question to you, did you see uniformity in how we perceive ourselves as a board and what Calbright's mission is? You don't have to answer that right now, but I think we need to have solid talking points, and when we go to legislatures, we have to articulate our brand. And back to the Lieutenant Governor's point, what is it that we do well and different from other colleges? And just got to be a quick thing that you identify Calbright with this very, very positive thing that only Calbright does.
Okay, so I've just added to the weakness point, and I'm hoping you can see. Maybe, Denzel, can you roll back up to weaknesses for a sec? Thanks. So here, I've just broadened this out a bit. This points, I think when you look at the weaknesses, they point very clearly to things we can do. Kevin, does that better capture where we're headed? And then, I'm sorry, you're on mute.
What I was going to say is we just need something very succinct,
right,
that creates our brand. Why are we different and unique from other parts of the community college system?
Yeah, and I think that is a real lesson that came through from this exercise for me, and is that you're not there yet, but I think you want to get there as a board, is my impression.
Well, and this is Darius. Let me just reiterate what Kevin just said. And I'm going to use one region, not a particular district or college. But San Diego believes that what they're providing to their students is comparable to what we are providing at Calbright. And every time I talk to either board members or folks down there, they do not like what we're doing because they believe they're doing it better. And I think especially when they start to lobby and influence,
we have to be able to articulate why we are different and why we have either an infrastructure that helps all colleges and our students.
And Lauren, before we go, so I just wanted to add one last thing under the under the threats is, you know, the online the for-profit online colleges have been very aggressive in trying to fill the space here during COVID, and there's, from what I understand, scooping up more and more people, and so we have to recognize that we have a very aggressive competitor with a lot of money in marketing out there, and that we need to understand how we compete with that.
Can someone help me understand the psychology of that, Tom? Because if the for-profit colleges are for-profit, they are charging their students money, they're putting their students in debt, but we're offering a free alternative. Like, why are people not excited to go with free? I love free. I'm a big fan of free.
They don't know about us. I mean, the for-profits market like mad, and so people are being bombarded. You know, our target audience being bombarded with messages from the for-profits, and they don't hear anything from us.
But I hope that our messaging includes that affordability front and center.
Yeah, but also depending on the college, the experience is a lot different. The registration process is easier. You know, you don't have to register every semester for class. You know, the books are already loaded in. So the experience is a lot different than it is in the community college. Our enrollment process is cumbersome. And, you know, when you go and look at the full cost of attending, it's just a different experience with the for-profits than it is with the community colleges too, with some of them, not all of the for-profits, but I think that weighs into it too. It's not just about cost.
So folks, we've now eaten our break time, which I think is fine, because I'll tell you, I was worried that we would run out of things to talk about because it's awkward online as a group, and that is clearly not the case. I think this captures, nothing is going to be perfect and comprehensive, but this captures a lot of the key things that we need to be looking at. And I'm hoping maybe, Denzel, you can reformat this while we're doing the next exercise, so there's a way to show it all on one page. I don't know if that's possible, but if it is, that would be great. And if not, we'll share it back after so everyone can see it and reference it. So we're gonna move on. If folks are okay, and I'm not in charge of the overall timeline, if you need a break and there's a way to let the meeting run long, maybe Tom, you can speak to that.
I mean, we're not bound to complete it, you know, at 10:45, so it can run a little long. I think you could go to 11, but I wouldn't want it to go much farther than that.
So we're still probably cutting it a little tight. Show of hands in terms of just rolling on through or pausing for 5 minutes. Rolling on through, yes, looks like. Okay, we have a majority. If anyone does need a break, we'll all sympathize, and you can just turn off your screen for a moment. So we're going to go to the last exercise, which is success in 3 years. What are the key elements? Darius, can we go back to the slide deck? And it's, I believe, slide 15. And again, thanks everyone for your patience as we work through this kind of live, not live process. So back to slide, success in 3 years. What are the key elements? Great, thanks. So this is, as I said, the last activity. And I think we're just going to keep drawing on the conversation that we've had. These themes are just going to keep flowing through and give you more ideas. We're going to identify some key high-level elements of what success in 3 years can look like from your perspective as trustees. And before we dive in, I just wanted to share some guiding principles about how to try and stay focused on the strategic forest rather than the tactical trees. I think you guys have done an amazing job of that so far, better than almost anyone I've ever worked with as a board, including my own, which I had for many years. So we want to be high level and institutional in thinking about what success looks like, strategic, achievable, which, you know, has a lot of flex in it, but, you know, within the realm of reasonable possibility in 3 years. Adaptable, so things that don't set Calbright up to have to do something just one way when we're in a really dynamic environment financially, in terms of the workforce, and essential. So things that are really critical to Calbright's success. And what we're going to do is go to a live document. Again, a different one, Denzel. This is the elements of success. And what I've done is I have preloaded things that came through from your definitions of success in the pre-work as a starting point and organized them the way I shared them with you before. This is, which we can change anything about this as we go. So we're going to look at that and see what you think should be added or changed, and then narrow the list down to 10 priorities that you all think belong. They don't have to be ranked, just get it down to 10. And then we're going to do a poll just for the trustees, where you guys are going to pick your top 3 of that 10. Don't worry, I'll give these instructions again, to get a sense of where you're converging or diverging as a group. And to reinforce, this is not a decision-making exercise, but this is moving us all towards, I think, that clearer story that folks want to have, and also what really belongs in a strategic vision for Calbright. And this is from where you sit as board members. So I'm gonna just go ahead and start. And my apologies, I really appreciate it if folks see someone who wants to talk and I don't. When I'm adding stuff to the document, I can't track the visuals as well from the Zoom. So take a look at this list of strategic elements of success in 3 years. Based on the conversation we've just had, again, I'm fine. Everyone should just jump in. That's been working really well. Thoughts about, are there things missing? Are there things that you think are at the wrong level? Just framed incorrectly. Go for it. And do you want to think about a different kind of organization?
Lauren, but this is hard to this is Amy. It's kind of hard to bucket it out because, you know, I have a tendency to think of things in the term of order of operations. And so it's like when we look under narrative success and it's need and value recognized, there are other that will feed into that, in my opinion. Like our need and value will be recognized when our duplication concerns are addressed, our cost concerns are addressed, you know what I mean? Some of them,
well, maybe that's how we narrow it down, right? These are, I was trying to sort of give the full range of what was coming up in your different ways of talking about success in 3 years. And I think it does vary. Just like you could say student success really is an outcome rather than maybe a separate thing for this purpose. So are we thinking then this priority list can shift around a lot, but maybe it is addressing concerns.
Can I ask the question?
Please.
You know, and I don't know if I'm off base, but you know, someone brought up the cost because of the low amount of students. What if it was flipped in the number of, and it was the number of districts or colleges enrolled? Like, what is that appropriate for? What, you know, how does that fit into this? So like if the goal was, you know, the number of partnerships versus the number of students enrolled.
Number of partnerships, district partnerships?
Yeah, like a greater emphasis on the service provided to colleges to be able to do this. Like, is that off base or just, and I, you know, I'm not saying it needs to go. I just was curious about, you know, folks' thought on that.
Well, Joseph, I had mentioned that this is Darius. You know, when we talk to people in the legislature, they do a comparison, you know, to number of students served.
Yeah.
And you heard a lot of criticism as we went through the process, Joseph, is, hey, we invest X number of dollars in a student at a campus,
Sorry,
So-
Darius, we just lost your audio.
And this is what we're paying, and or less than 1,000. And so, yeah, and they don't monetize.
Darius, I'm sorry, your audio's cutting in and out.
Sorry about that. So are you there? Am I there?
Yeah, now we can hear you.
Yeah, Joseph, I was just saying that, their criticism has been apples to apples. I don't think they care about partnerships because as we conceptualized it, it was always about the number of students. And I think that our biggest critics, both, in the system and in the legislature, has always been about the fact, or thus far has been about the fact we don't serve the number of students we should.
Although, I mean, and this is where I think Joseph's point about having clear talking points is needed. It's really not apples to apples because it fails to recognize marginal cost, which is a key component in how you look at financial modeling in higher ed. And so, we have, and Tom's used the term startup, we have some institutional costs that we've had to build up that you need for scale. And that's like wonky stuff that, no, I don't know that there's a talking point around it because it's like deep in the wonk woods. But I agree, it's something that's been raised, but it's also kind of, more like apples to oranges.
So can I ask for clarification here? So I'm highlighting things on this existing list and adjusting a bit that I think I'm hearing. So adding value to the community colleges includes growing the number of district partnerships. And then sustainable, are we saying sustainable marginal cost per student at the end of 3 years? So
I just don't think we should be compared to the colleges. Just, I think it's just too soon to define that. I think we're, and I could just be completely off.
well, I think whether right or wrong, I think what I'm hearing from others is you will be compared. Sorry,
Yes.
go ahead,
Okay.
Pam.
Yes,
Okay.
we will be compared. And we're missing an important part of this conversation, and that is that for our community colleges, the systems, we have failed to really offer an experience for our students that keep them engaged. We are losing students, and so while we are funded in a way that talks about students in seats, and we've tried to move away from that particular type of funding, we are challenged with our students are poor. Or low income students and students of color, African Americans, Latinos, and certain segments of the API population. They're not completing, and they have life requirements, and it's not a 2-year college experience. It's not even a 3-year college experience. It is a 5-year college experience that should have been done in 2 years, and at the most in 3 years. And so that is what we're bumping up against. And so that's the competition that we have, and why Calbright is so important. One, it's dealing with the world of work, but it's also dealing with the world of work in a way that there's a job at the end of it. Because the reality is for our traditional community colleges, while it's not stated, you want a job at the end of that too, or you're transferring to a 4-year institution for a job at the end of that pays a living wage and benefits and all of that. So I think we're talking about Calbright, and we're talking about community colleges in a way that we've got to talk about them both, because we're being compared to them. Our programs are being compared to them. And in many cases, we're on the right pathway in terms of our 115 other colleges with programs, with pathways, with AB 705 reforms, with all of that. But again, we are doing it in a very different modality. And so I just want to speak, wanted to speak to that piece of it.
So are we talking about comparable?
No, I I would hesitate to have a 3-year window on a equivalency for marginal cost of students to the community colleges. I don't think that is a valid comparison, frankly. But I think the larger point is that there should be a clear understanding, to Amy's point, about when we get to that marginal cost per student, what that plan is for enrollment growth that gets us there. So there are measures along the way, but they're not forcing us into a comparison that's largely not valid because of all the things that are talked about.
Yeah.
So Ajita, is it reasonable to think about a declining marginal cost per student, or just some decline over the next 3 years, or do you think it's too soon because the startup phase is inherently expensive?
I'd actually be curious to someone like Amy's thoughts on how you capture that in a metric.
What I think, which is I'm kind of stuck on this order of operations thing only because really, and this sounds like a platitude, but it's absolutely true. It has to be measured by our student success. So to the degree that we can have students complete Calbright and get a better job, get on a better career trajectory, get increased earnings. I think, I understand the reality that people are talking about cost. We could very well discover that for students that have had so many barriers, for students who are living their lives, the cost may be greater. I think a lot of people would say community college as a cost structure, if we compare ourselves to that, we're always going to be in a bit of a deficit because we don't really fund community colleges adequately in the state either. I think in some ways it's like once we can show the value to the student and or, the employer or the partner on the other side, the cost becomes, more ancillary, I guess, for lack of a better term, because we may find that the supports that are required are more expensive. I mean, I don't know that we know that yet, but I would not be surprised if that is what we learn.
So is demonstrate worth the cost a better way to describe this?
I think instead of cost concerns addressed under narrative success, I think it just gets back to value. If we're right, we just pivot away from cost altogether, and we talk about value as opposed to cost. And then I think in the priority list, it's coming through what everybody said. It is none of this. Really, I think what's paramount is what we've all talked about is we need to clearly demonstrate to the outside world what Calbright is. I still think there is a fundamental misunderstanding that then, all these other problems trickle down. And it's said in so many ways, but I think it needs to just be stated that to be one of our priorities is, increasing understanding and then positively engaging our broader constituency, because the rest all falls from there.
So I think I'm starting to construct what I think is a list, and maybe these two are even, we may not even need to we not get to 10. We may get to a shorter list just through conversation and not need to even do the poll. I'm trying to balance looking at this document and looking at all of you. So are these two things the same? Demonstrate worth the cost and value of Calbright demonstrated? Really want to just, we can at a high level, strategic level, we're demonstrating value. Is that Pam?
I like that as opposed to the demonstrating the cost.
So the value and the need are, so demonstrating and recognition are different things. You can demonstrate your heart's delight, but you also need people to see it and believe it.
That's right.
So, I also think that the word value is very broad, though. I'd love for us to delve into what we mean by value, because we haven't talked about programmatic excellence or being a center of excellence. We have talked about program growth, enrollment growth, partnership growth, but would people come here because we are a center of excellence on something?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But do these get at the questions that Lieutenant Governor was asking about the differentiation? And
Let me just say, I think that this conversation's definitely going in the right direction.
Okay.
In my opinion, again, very new to this, but I think these are exactly the kinds of things that we should be focused on and continuing to build the narrative to have the kind of communications that will be really helpful, as well, of course, setting the vision.
So I'm freelancing a little bit here on this list based on what I'm hearing and through this whole conversation, not just now. How is this looking to folks?
I would just add that kind of an ante is to meet the statutory goals. I mean, that is mandatory. So that's got to be on the list.
Yep, that's on the left, and we'll add it to the right. It was down here. How about some of the things that were about retaining flexibility? I was hearing a lot about that in the last discussion.
Excuse me, Lauren. Calm is trying to ask a question.
Oh, thank you so much. Calm?
Hey, not quite a question. I just, I would like to see somewhere on this priority list. I've heard from several board members now, the absolute need to have, students advocating, have more opportunities for members of Calbright, various constituency groups advocating on our behalf, really speaking to our vision, speaking to our mission. I think one way to do that is to empower constituency groups internally to create opportunities to collect and apply feedback, and then actionably act on that feedback and provide advocacy opportunities related.
I think I'm trying to figure out how to phrase that. Is it about engaging internal constituencies in advocating for Calbright?
Yeah, ensuring internal constituencies have a seat at the table for decisions that Calbright makes. I think a large part of it may be developing participatory governance. If this is a 3-year timeline, I'd hope by the third year that Calbright would have a pretty in-depth participatory governance structure that constituencies, especially Calbright students who are, we're preaching to the uniqueness of Calbright students. Their feedback is critical in the success of our institution, in the outlook of our institution, in the legislature's perspective of our institution, I think.
So is this plan for participatory government in place, since we're talking about 3 years?
I think that's fine, but I also want to say I think it's a little broader than, I think Holmes seemed to be speaking a little broader than that. So I would say, like, part of it is that, part of it is some of the student community stuff that strengthen constituency-based advocacy, right? There's structures for it, but then there's also the programmatic engagement of it. So I wouldn't do that as a separate bullet necessarily. I would just say it's all kind of in that collective student voice, employer voice, in the context of who become our advocacy leads.
Absolutely.
More stakeholders, internal and external, engaged.
I think it has to include both the students, but also, as other people have talked about, kind of the employer community, others that could be really effective advocates if they, if they have a positive experience and are bought in, right? It's the students need to be bought in. It's businesses, community, other types of community leaders that might benefit from, see a positive benefit, need to be kind of bought into our model and see it actually, creating some positive outcomes for them.
Okay.
I just want to give a 10-minute warning. The board can engage for another 10 minutes, and then we need to have public comment. So just wanted to
thank you, Tom. So I guess I don't know that we need to do a poll. If does this look like the right list to folks of, and again, it's not a decision point. It's more, is this a good reflection of where you as the board are landing on shared ideas for what's going to signal success in 3 years at a high level on the right, on what currently says priority list for poll?
I think it looks really great. And, I would just add, under that last bullet point, a priority list, I would just add faculty underneath.
Absolutely.
I think faculty have been perhaps, the most outspoken critics of Calbright. And the more that we engage them, kind of like how the Chancellor's Office engaged the ASCCC in various, I think if we make that concerted effort, we really do a great deal to enhance Calbright's reputation and all that good stuff.
Okay.
As bullet point, I'm thinking that also to add advocating and decision-making process, because advocating is one thing, but when it comes to the decisions, students, faculty, and businesses and community leaders should also be there.
Informing. That's all. We've packed a lot in there, which can be unpacked at another time, but does that cover it?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think the first three bullets are quite similar, and maybe there's a way to narrow that down. And I also think if we're going to have a priority list, it clearly has to include strengthening relationships with state government officials. That's a very high priority in my view.
Yep.
Yeah, and this Darius, I would reiterate that. I think it's your biggest priority. And I think, having, advocates there that understand what the critics are saying and then being able to develop a messaging system that addresses all their concerns is going to be key and crucial.
And I also think,
yep.
I'm sorry, just the deliver value for students, those metrics on completions, jobs, and earnings, just can't be overlooked. I mean, I'm not sure if that's evidence of value to students at the state, but that is essential. I mean, we need to show with numbers that that students are completing, they're getting jobs, and they're increasing their earnings. I mean,
so strong and improving student outcomes on the right.
I think I think Tom is right. You have to articulate what we're looking for in terms of
completions, better jobs
and earnings.
Jobs.
Just jobs and earnings.
Okay.
You don't need to say jobs twice.
And then in the first one, I think we do add value to the CCC. So I think we should change it to demonstrate as opposed to add. The problem is people aren't recognizing it.
Okay.
And if you qualify under the bullet, strong and improving student outcomes, it's not any job. It is
good jobs.
Jobs.
I'm only summarizing for this purpose. I think we will go on the actual.
Right. Okay.
Go ahead.
The one I do want to, I think the part of our process is and has to be and will continue to be demonstrating value to employers as well. Because I don't think we get any of the outcomes unless we also consider that in our explicit focus.
Okay, so I'm going to say, in fact, there's a demonstrating value, and that's
across stakeholders, yeah.
How's that?
Yeah.
So you need to demonstrate value. You need to gain recognition of value. The strengthened relationship with state government officials will partly come from that, but not only from that. You need to deliver excellence to students. You need strong and improving student outcomes we've listed, meet statutory goals, more stakeholders engaged in informing and advocating. I think that's a great list.
And just one important point, and this goes without saying really, but the value and the jobs and the earnings have to come about because they went through Calbright. In other words, but for Calbright, they wouldn't have these outcomes, and that's what sets us apart from the community colleges. We have to make that link. And I think once we make the link to say that, but for Calbright, we have these great outcomes.
Right.
The cost issue becomes secondary. I don't think the legislature, the people who are wary of Calbright won't be as wary if they see these good outcomes related directly to Calbright.
Got it. So I just added because of Calbright here. So given that we've got just 5 more minutes, Denzel, maybe we can go back to the slides, to the wrapping up slide. We're going to skip the poll. Save that. Now that we know how to do it, we'll save it for another time if anyone wants to do polls. And really here, I don't want to use all the time talking at you. I think we have, we want to make sure we have time for other folks to help wrap things up. I'll just say, I feel like from my perspective as an invested facilitator, you've done an amazing job of meeting the goals for today. And frankly, using the time so well that I think some of the things in my reflections list you've already hit. But I also just wanted to point to the fact that, again, where we are in the process and that now we're going to go into report development, and you'll have a chance to get updates and review as that process proceeds. Tom, do you want to pose any questions? Pam, I know you were going to wrap up as well, and I know we had all this time we thought we needed to fill, and now I'm trying to tighten it. So maybe Pam.
I think that we have spoken as a body in where our direction is and where we need to go. And thank you so much for the facilitation of that and for everybody's commitment to a discussion that will, what I believe will make Calbright a better entity, and that we will be able to explain it in unison in our messaging to the legislature.
Okay, so that's a wrap. Thank you very much, Lauren. Thanks for all the board members who participated. I'd now like to open it up to public comment. Do we have anyone who has expressed an interest in making a public comment? Why don't you take down the PowerPoint?
We have a request for public comments that's not pertaining necessarily to this item, but just in general. Ashley, did you want to make a comment now?
We can wait on it. We can wait on it until we have general public comment and allow time for specific to strategic vision.
Perfect.
Well, no, I mean, right now is when we're supposed to be getting comment on the strategic vision. The public comment at the end of the meeting is for any other item, but if it's on this item, we should hear the comment now.
Is not on this item.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. So there's no public comment on this item. Okay. Well, great. Thanks, everyone. And we will now adjourn to a closed session of the board. And we should be back, I'd say, certainly within a half hour. Thank you.
Tom, are we immediately going to closed session right now?
Yes. I mean, if you need to take a quick break, we won't start until everybody's back.
Okay.
Okay. Okay, I think we, looks like we have almost everyone back, maybe everyone. Welcome back to the public session. The report out of the closed session is that the board unanimously approved 2 tort claims. And that is all we have to report. So with that, we are going to go on to item 4, the consent agenda.
Tom,
Yes.
do you mind if I do my report first?
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, I forgot we
thank
skipped
you.
over your president's report. Let's go right to that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate you all accommodating a slight snafu in my schedule earlier today. Thank you, President Epstein, Vice President Haynes, and members of the Board of Trustees. It's fall, the days are getting shorter, and the year has been a long one for all of us. The last several weeks have been particularly weighty as pandemic conditions are heightened and the country is transitioning to new leadership at the federal level. At Calbright, our team of faculty, staff, and administrators are continuing our work, and we heard a little bit of this earlier, making critical adjustments around the student experience. With the launch of updates to our new student portal, the portal has been completely redesigned to make it easier and communicate more effectively towards students to help them through each stage of their journey in order to progress over the past several weeks. We have also supported concurrent advancement of students through their 21st century and technical skills content, which will better set up both current students, but also future students for success. And with these 2 elements in place, we are now stepping up student enrollments and outreach over the course of now through the new year. As we continue our efforts to build that experience, we're reaching out to other system institutions who are experiencing similar pain points in the transition to online, and many of whom are facing some of these frontline challenges with respect to equity, but also documented enrollment declines. And we have developed a interested parties memo, which I had shared with the executive committee last month, that highlights critical and achievable fixes to OpenCCC and CCC Apply, the system's online application, that can result in a much more streamlined, cohesive experience for incoming students system-wide, and can actually enhance the ability of colleges to remotely support all of their prospective students more equitably through that entire application process. A solution that in my conversations with a number of system leaders is something that they agree they could benefit from. We are in the process of reaching out to other institutions to both collect feedback on that and also to advance those recommendations so that they could be swiftly implemented to affect fall enrollments throughout the CCC system. Later this week, I will also be at the Community College League of California's annual conference and engaging in a conversation on how to better respond to the needs of working adults. This is in partnering with 4 other community college district leaders. And the session is really designed to share our recent research from employers and potential students on current hiring and training needs, and highlighting how we can better leverage the respective strengths of some of our different institutions and regional networks to collaborate around the kind of actions that are designed to develop, to test, and to implement kind of skills-based strategies for economically disconnected Californians. As a college, we're also making steady progress towards our organizational development while also strengthening institutional effectiveness. Calbright Connect is our enterprise resource planning and information system. It's an implementation project that we have with Anthology, and it's continuing to lay some of the critical foundations that we needed to meet the college's growth and development in the coming years. Our engineering team and the engineering team at Anthology have been steeped in efforts to better understand their capabilities around some integrations that we will need to advance our planned approach for using a Salesforce-based customer-focused system on the front lines of the work that our faculty, staff, and administrators do, and to provide for more seamless interaction of students across our institution. Last week, several members of the college, including our faculty, participated in training provided by the Competency-Based Education Network
That's really designed to strengthen the development and implementation of something we talked a little bit about earlier, which is that high quality CBE programming and ways for us to strengthen the quality of teaching and learning that's focused on adult students. We're also well underway on our efforts to secure accreditation. We're actively engaged in the self-evaluation process for quality assurance with the Distance Education Accrediting Commission. Calbright's DX Steering Committee will have its self-evaluation report completed by early 2021, and it'll allow for that formal accreditation petition in advance of our July 1 statutory deadline. As we strengthen our organizational operations and institutional effectiveness, we have also taken additional steps around governance, including, and this is much thanks to Trustee Fitzgerald, including collecting an interest petition for Calbright students to develop a student body association. This month, we are also happy to welcome CTA as our officially recognized and exclusive representation for our faculty. And this fall, recruitment and hiring for Calbright has been a core part of our work and our efforts and our progress. We've had several new individuals join the Calbright team and more joining in the next few weeks, as well as several searches underway. Doing a lot of work on the hiring front. As we say hello to new additions, we are also saying goodbye to someone dear to us. Nick Schweitzer, who I described as our unflappable CEO, is transitioning to a new role back to his K-12 roots. And I did want to take this opportunity to formally thank him and personally thank him for all of his work and his continued support, over the past year and even going forward. His tireless efforts have really been invaluable to carrying the college through very difficult times and on through to the other side. And I, along with so many others at the college, are going to miss him beyond measure. And I don't know if we have Nick. He was going to join us for a bit, but I've embarrassed him enough internally with those accolades, so maybe he'll be spared this moment. Lastly, we have been hard at work around the development of the college's new strategic vision. So just a genuine thank you to all of the members of the Board of Trustees for your continued participation in that process. I really see it as an opportunity for us to, have some focus around a moment of critical development for the college that's necessary to respond to the times that we're going to see in the coming months and years. Our discussion today is going to be supplemented by a lot of input from a broad range of stakeholders, the research and data from our work with prospective students and industry and employers, and the expertise of our growing team at the college that will help set that high-level direction that'll allow us to develop more concrete planning for the next sure-footed steps over the next few months and years to ensure a stronger future for the college. So thank you to all of you. And with that, let's keep moving.
Okay, Nick, I see your box is in the Zoom. If you're there, please give us your parting wisdom.
I thought I gave you all parting wisdom last time, but here to continue to support Calbright. Assist in any way I can. So hopefully you'll see me a little bit longer. And I think last time I said I'm very optimistic about Calbright and its future. I think it's the future's never been brighter for Calbright. I think we're in several areas we're moving in the right direction, and I also know they're recruiting for a replacement, and they're a couple of good candidates. So I think things are in good shape. So, but as I said, be around to continue to support in any way I can. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much. At the executive committee, we all did a little round of accolades for Nick, and you're greatly appreciated. I don't know if anybody else who's not on the executive committee wants to say anything.
I would like to, if that's possible.
Sure.
I had the privilege of serving with Nick on many surprisingly participatory governance committees in Calbright, and this man finds the time, with the immense responsibilities that he has to participate in the foundational structures of Calbright, which I saw as immensely important. And so I'm really glad that Nick is continuing to serve students in his future endeavors, and we need voices like Nick's empowering the next generation of leaders. So thank you so much for your service to Calbright, and best of luck in your future endeavors.
Yeah, thank you very much. Certainly, I think everyone at Calbright, from Ajita, from the President Tal Welkerman and on down, are very very deeply committed to supporting students, and are engaged at all levels of the work. So it's been great to work with that team. So and with all of you as board members, Member Fitzgerald, certainly your engagement on the various committees, representing students, representing our students, was very much appreciated, and we benefited greatly from that. So I appreciate that.
Okay, thanks. Anyone else? All right, Nick, well, we're all going to give you a round of applause here.
Thank you.
And best of luck saving the Sacramento schools next.
Yeah.
Okay, moving on to the consent agenda. Are you presenting that? Is that who's presenting that? And we don't need a presentation, we just need a motion.
Consent calendar. This is Amy.
And this is Pam. I'll second.
Okay. Any discussion? Any public comment?
Ashley has a standing comment I think would be appropriate to be heard now.
I'm sorry?
Okay, Ashley. Ashley Odell, president of the Calbright Faculty Association, has a comment that I think would be appropriate to be heard now.
Okay.
Hello, esteemed board members. How are you? It's sort of just a general comment, so I hope that it is the appropriate time to present this, but I just wanted to introduce myself as the newly elected president of the Calbright Faculty Association, and say that I appreciate the voluntary recognition of the CFA, and request that there be a standing placeholder for reports from faculty on the Board of Trustees meeting agenda moving forward, if that's possible and agreeable.
Okay, thank you very much, and welcome to your new role.
Thank you so much.
We'll look forward to hearing from you.
Thank you.
Okay, please call the roll.
Hildegard Aguinaldo,
Yes.
Darius Anderson,
Yes.
Amy Costa,
Aye.
Tom Epstein,
Aye.
Felicia Escobar Carrillo,
Aye.
Calm Fitzgerald,
Aye.
Jolena Grande,
Aye.
Pam Haynes,
Aye.
Kevin Hall,
Aye.
Lieutenant Governor Ilani Kounalakis,
Aye.
Jennifer Perry, Bill Rawlings,
Aye.
Valerie Shaw,
Aye.
Ulia Tarasova.
I'm not a voting member.
Oh, I'm sorry. Blas Villalobos
Aye.
and Joseph Williams.
Yes.
Okay, the consent agenda is approved, and we will now, as I indicated earlier, skip the action items and move right to information reports. Item 6.1, contracts and purchases.
Hello, Governing Board, President Epstein, Vice President Haynes, and President Tallwalker-Minnan. Today we're bringing our October contracts to you with 2 items of significant value, $95,000 contract for Halo Cintiate and one $75,000 contract for EduCred. Any questions at this time? And we recommend that this be approved.
Anyone have any concerns, comments, or questions about this item, contracts and purchases? Okay, then is there a motion to approve?
I move approval.
Tom, point of order, isn't this an informational item?
Oh, thank you. I got fooled when she said she wanted approval. Right, okay.
My apologies.
This is just for everybody's information. Thank you. Okay, now on to the 6.2, the first quarter budget update.
And there's a presentation, I believe. Okay, and we are presenting the first quarter for fiscal year 2021. So these are, this is our updated budget and expenditures through September 30th of this year. So our 2021 budget objectives, we're stepping up our efforts to serve more students and solve for the challenges that we're facing currently, to also help displaced students through with our current economic conditions. We're also striving to do more with less, developing a leaner organization so we can flexibly respond to the changing programmatic needs of the state's economy, which will help us with realizing our hope of sustainability. Also readying for scale, building the functional capacity of the college to grow, including expanding our technological and staffing infrastructure, developing new revenue models and growth strategy for the college to withstand economic changes. So this is our current Q1 budget model, including the annual funding and our one-time funds. As you can see, our expenses are now reflecting our salaries for our faculty. Since we are no longer running our payroll through the foundation, this will look a little new to you. Any questions? Okay. So our annual funding, which is our ongoing funding, we've included staffing of approximately 62 FTE, and we assumed approximately 18 of the FTE will be added in the first half of 2021. As you've heard, we are hiring folks right now, bringing some folks to the board and have some new folks joining us. For budget development, we assume that it would take a few months to hire these folks, and as we bring back subsequent quarters, we will update that to reflect the hiring as it stands. While Calbright has actively been hiring, attrition has offset some of those gains. So currently our full-time equivalent is at 44. Expenditures have been reduced in the operating expense category, and that is due to some of the contracted positions becoming staff and faculty positions. And most of the expenditures that you do see in this category are our software licensing and contract services, which are typically annual contracts. And this is just our annual funding. You can see that we have our general apportionment of 15 million, which was reduced from the 20 million in prior years. We have our anticipated interest revenue and again, the expenses. Our one-time funding that is helping us to start up and scale up the college. We have 12.5 million budgeted for the 42 FTE consultants and contract services that'll be employed for 2 to 3 years to help support our development and scale up of the college. We have 7 million budgeted to improve Calbright's existing programs and develop new program pathways. And year to date, as of the end of September, we've spent $450,000 expanding to complete development of Calbright's programs, build up our organizational capacity, and develop those new pathways. We have $5 million for student outreach, and those are partnerships with labor organization, community-based organizations, and employment intermediaries. Year to date, we've spent $211,000 used for outreach. Our technology and facilities infrastructure, we have $5 million budgeted to implement the enterprise resource planning system that Ajita mentioned. This is a partnership with Anthology and to begin development of adaptive learning, simulated experience, and student support technologies. $7.9 million has been budgeted for capital outlay expenditures, including a headquarters build out and equipment for additional staff and students. Year to date, we have had no expenditures as of the end of September for implementation. We have some software licensing that was reflected as noted in the previous slide that is not considered one time but is ongoing. We have budgeted for strategic initiatives to support our students. We have $5 million in statewide workforce exchange partnerships with economic development agencies, America's Job Centers of California, strong workforce, regional and sector partners, community colleges, and employers. We've budgeted $5 million to further develop online competency-based education and pathways with other community colleges for Calbright students to continue their education, and $10 million for partnerships with place-based agencies such as community colleges, libraries, American Job Centers, et cetera, and for Calbright to establish its own centers to provide facilities for in-person support of Calbright students. Year to date, Calbright has established its first partnerships with place-based agencies and developed program pathways and is actively pursuing additional facility sharing and pathway partnerships, as well as a workforce partnership. However, we have not incurred any expenses for these as of the end of September. And this reflects our current one-time funds. We had a beginning balance of $82 million, and the expenditures we just discussed have been budgeted in these different categories. Any questions?
This is Pam. I do, and it's on the last slide relative to student outreach, where $5 million has been budgeted, but only 200,000 plus has been expended. And so, is there the expectation that what we have in terms of outreach will be expended by the end of this fiscal year?
Yeah, maybe I can probably help out with that. This is Nick Schweitzer. I did quite a bit of work in generating this presentation, and so I think as we've been, and President Tal Walker-Menden could probably speak to this a little bit as well. But as we have been working on focusing on strengthening our programs and looking at our beta cohort and making those improvements, we've not really put a lot of money into outreach the last few months. I think the intention is, though, to really ramp up. Once we have our programs where we'd like to see them in terms of quality and access and things like that, then we really intend to ramp up significantly on the outreach. It's a little bit early, though, right now, just after the first quarter, to know whether we'll spend the full $5 million. I certainly think it's still entirely reasonable that we could, though. So we would not make changes to that projection at this point in time.
Okay. Thank you for that explanation.
This is Darius. Can I ask a question of Amy? Amy, are you concerned about in the January budget cycle with the legislature that they could claw back any of these dollars?
They always can. The governor and his proposal can always claw back dollars. I think in part we're operating within Proposition 98. So, it has to kind of happen within that envelope. But, certainly Nick and I have been involved in other endeavors in which that occurred, where things were repurposed. And, it could happen depending on how the revenues come in, which Department of Finance should know here in the next week or so.
Yeah, I just wanted to add on to that. So yeah, certainly, I mean, last budget cycle, they did claw back 40 million. So we know they can and will do that. I know it's been an ongoing discussion in terms of, spending more of the one-time funds. And, we've made certainly this year, and you can see in this presentation the numbers, we're making a real concerted effort to really spend these one-time monies, before ongoing funds, and really put as much, into, or allocate as many of the expenditures as possible towards the one-time funds.
And I just think in that vein, starting to talk to our supporters, that are in the legislature and getting active, because obviously once the governor does it, there'll be a negotiation with the legislature. And I think we have to get out ahead of this one, because depending on how revenues come in, everybody's forecasting they will have problems. We just don't know how large they are.
Yeah, and I'll just say I 100% agree, Darius, Trustee Anderson. Next week, we actually have Jenny Johnson, who comes to us from the governor's office, who will be leading the GR and advocacy efforts for the cycle for us as well. And very much looking forward to having her on board and helping us dive in with 2 feet there.
That's great.
When you all are saying outreach, is that the same as marketing? And is there a way to get a visual representation of where geographically some of these partnerships you're looking at are going to be?
We can do both of those things. Marketing is a component of it, for sure. Last month, and I can circulate this to the larger board, we had a presentation from our marketing firm, Census, that did a deep dive quantitative qualitative study on both the employers and industries in various regions throughout California that we are looking at, as well as prospective groups of students. And so we can share some of that data. We're still digging into it to also inform our additional outreach efforts.
I just want to say I'd wear a Calbright hoodie, and I'll take a flag too if you get some.
We've been very careful to not swag out, because we know how upsetting the optics of that can be, even though brand recognition is,
I'm just saying,
supreme, a winning strategy for many organizations.
Yeah, some of us have a phone charger.
Even I don't have a hoodie.
Yeah, some of us do have a phone charger from the original Calbright launch, though, branded.
Yeah, but could we buy a hoodie?
Yeah,
I'd like to buy a hoodie.
There is the Calbright store. It's our new fundraising campaign. Okay, joking aside.
Can I ask a question, Tom?
Oh, and wait, but it's not. This is a serious point. Araceli just posted everyone that there is an online Calbright store.
It.
So check it out.
I use my coffee mug all the time. My Calbright coffee mug.
I'm sorry. Who is up next?
I had a question. I don't know if there was you. It has to do with outreach, and we've had some conversations, and I know Felicia offered kind of some of her experience, and I'm talking more kind of about community-focused student outreach, and I'm just curious, given COVID, a lot of those types of outreach activities, whether it's through the census or, CalSOAP, they're really more kind of physical community events. So how are you guys thinking about that in light of, kind of this new operational environment we find ourselves in?
Yeah, that's been rough. And I think it is for everybody, largely because a number of those organizations actually aren't open for business in lots of ways. And so, the fall conference circuit, the event circuit that we would normally engage in hasn't really been available to us. So we've done a combination of things, and I think what it's going to lead us towards is having to think about doing a bit more direct to prospective student outreach in initial parts of our work, because because the normal processes that we've tried, to even host webinar or online events for groups have been not that well attended. And when we do calling through some of those areas, some of those regional based organizations aren't on site or are somehow accessible. So there's a lot more I think we have to do on that front, and I think we're supplementing in the short run by doing more of the direct outreach.
I think some of the relationships that you're building with other members of our community college, family, I think will also be interesting ways to think about how you target outreach. And so hopefully, I'm sure you all are thinking about how you're rolling out those partnerships, but it's just something else to think about, because it is hard. There's so many Zoom happy hours, webinars, breakfasts, all kinds of things happening. So it is hard to break through that. So I can understand the challenge.
Yeah. Thank you.
I think you may find some opportunities with the Conference of Mayors and really get the locales thinking about how this can help their communities, and get them helping with just kind of getting the word out to folks in their communities. I mean, they're closer to the ground than we are, and so it's to their benefit. It's to a mayor's benefit to try to get their residents to get more education.
Yes. I think we have part of it is that first stage of being able to communicate effectively our value to those local areas. And some of that we're learning through some conversations we're actually having with the city of Stockton around their efforts. And I think that's building our understanding of how to do effective outreach at the local level to local electeds.
President Epstein, I have a question about the budget.
Go for it.
Ajita, I'm just curious. I know that we've done a lot of work together, and I've done a lot of work with various members of Calbright's administration to lay the foundation for the Student Body Association. And if this is a budget that's going to be reflected, 2021, do we think about what funding the SBA might need foundationally? Is that something that we include in here? Obviously, it wouldn't compare to any of the numbers, the length of the numbers that were mostly on that document, but I think definitely some initial funding might be important. I'm just wondering if you've thought about that.
Nick, you can answer this probably more directly, but we've thought about that in terms of, because that's an ongoing internal expense that we would have on the ongoing side of the budget. So there is space in the budget to do things in that vein, and that's also going to be true of some of the other governance units and activities that we have to maintain internally.
Yes, yeah, for sure. I mean, from the significant expense for that is of course the staffing support, and we've certainly done some thinking around how to make sure that there's ongoing staffing support for both student and all governments for the college.
Great, thank you.
Anything else? Okay, thank you very much, Jennifer. Good presentation, and Nick for your final bits of wisdom. Okay, we'll move on now to item 6.3, the faculty salary schedule analysis. Mr. McKnight? Go ahead, Mr. McKnight.
Oh, very well, thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to be with you here today. Since our last meeting with the board, we took into consideration the comments from various members of the board, and also working with the administration. we conducted further analysis on the faculty salary schedule. We based our analysis, as we have in the past, upon the peer group of institutions that we have been comparing ourselves to, looking in particular at their staffing practices, pay practices surrounding competency-based programs, especially for non-credit as well as credit teaching. And we've our analysis has brought us to this point where we have a single basic column of salary placement for both hire and advancement. All faculty teaching positions would be assigned to basically this column of hiring steps, as well as counselors, such as academic counselors and disability counseling. Teaching assignments would begin at step 1, provided that the candidate met the minimum qualifications as advertised by the college for hiring. So step 1 would represent the minimum. However, each candidate, of course, is looked at individually and in terms of what they bring to the college in terms of occupational work experience and teaching experience. And we would then evaluate using a formula, which I'll discuss in just a moment, their placement within the hiring range between step 1 and step 9 would be the maximum of the hiring range. Steps 10 through 16 would be for advancement of incumbent faculty. There's a couple of differences here. We're basically looking at teaching and occupational experience to formulate qualifications of new hires. And the formula we're looking at present would be for each 2 years of previous experience, whether teaching or occupational, would represent 1 step advancement in the hiring range, not to exceed the maximum of the hiring range. And of course, this is directly related experience to the assignment. We also recognize that there may be opportunities for the college to hire counselors and or possibly librarians. And under the chancellor system, those minimum qualifications are a master's degree. We would recommend using a stipend approach for assignments that require a master's or a degree, such as counseling. They would still be assigned to, the base salary would still be assigned to the same step series as the class 1, but would be paid a stipend for that additional degree. If the individual happens to have a doctorate degree, all the better, would still be treated within the stipend parameters of that. Let me stop there and ask if there are any questions.
Any questions, anyone?
Member Grundy.
I just want to say how thrilled I am to see that an equal set of importance is being placed on occupational experience as well as teaching experience when the candidate comes to Calbright. And I would love to applaud the efforts that have been made to recognize the value that work experience brings to the educational spectrum, especially in those career paths that Calbright is initially forming. Thank you very much for the work on this.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions for us? Let me summarize then by saying that there's still a step involved in this in terms of describing policies that surround each of these directions and specific procedures for that, describing qualifications, of course. You're currently relying upon the chancellor's minimum qualifications. You may wish to go beyond that. for some selections. So I would recommend that we move forward with evaluating and describing how the hiring range assignment specifically works and how the stipend would specifically work.
And I'll just reiterate that in the, as was described in the item, this is meant to be for analysis purposes. We have now recognized officially the faculty union for Calbright College, and so the faculty considerations around salary will be appropriately negotiated through that bargaining process.
Thank you. Any other board comments? Okay, I believe we have some public comment on this item.
We do. First up, we have Eric Calbright. Go ahead, Eric.
Good morning. It's still morning. President Epstein, Vice President Haynes, President Menon, and members of the board. I'm Eric Calbright. I'm the president of the Community College Association, and I am glad to see that Calbright is thinking about the appropriate faculty salaries. I, however, must express concern that I don't think any faculty so far have been consulted. When I look at this particular salary schedule, it is unusual. First of all, it has just one column. There's no requirement that you have multiple columns, but most schedules at most colleges do for two reasons. First of all, it incentivizes faculty into continuing their education so that they can attempt to, as we say, move columns. But it also reflects that faculty with higher levels of education generally command higher salaries in the open market. This schedule is also somewhat unusual in that it would result in a salary reduction for nearly all your current faculty. You initially hired all your faculty at the same rate, $100,000 for a 225-day contract. And obviously, many of your faculty would be taking a step backwards if this were to be adopted. Generally speaking, people don't like having their salaries cut. Now, there is one other piece that to which I'd like to bring your attention, and that is if you compare this salary column to a couple of schedules that I have available, including my own, it's looking pretty good. It would be for a middle column elsewhere in the system, somewhat above average, but that would be for a 180-day work year. If Calbright's going to expect a 225-day contract, this ends up being a fairly low salary for that. I would like to finally note that this is a negotiable item. I would suggest that you take the data that has been provided to you, including all the raw data about the other institutions, and provide this to the new faculty association so that they, along with Calbright's management, can get together to start negotiations on a new contract. An acceptable salary schedule would be part of that contract. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next, we have Ginny May. Go ahead, Ginny.
Thank you. Good morning, Board President Epstein, Vice President Haynes, College President Menon, and esteemed members of the board. Real quick, I just wanted to say thank you to Trustee Fitzgerald for his recommendations on the constituency groups and his mention of the ASCCC. Thank you. So courses are offered at Calbright in competency-based non-credit program pathway modules, a competency-based education model, and an alternative instructional methodology. In addition, the proposed regulations on competency-based education, detailed sections can be provided if desired for the California Community College Board of Governors to consider for approval later today or tomorrow. Make it clear that components of such education consist of courses. Per Title V, Section 53200 Local governing boards or their designees are to consult collegially with the Academic Senate on academic and professional matters. Placing courses within disciplines is part of the first academic and professional matter defined. So it is not uncommon for courses to be placed within multiple disciplines. And should this occur at Calbright, this could lead to ambiguities under the current draft of the faculty salary schedule, which appears to be based on minimum qualifications of the disciplines in which the courses are placed, as opposed to the academic qualifications of the faculty member. Furthermore, it is common practice among the other California community colleges to encourage the existing faculty to stay current and improve their education through advancement on the salary schedule by attaining additional education units. It is not evident that this would be an option for Calbright faculty. And finally, with a system-wide goal of increasing the diversity of faculty at all of the 116 California community colleges, it is important that the salary schedule reflect how the institution values the qualifications of diverse faculty. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So with that, are there any other public comments? Okay, well, that concludes that item. Now we're going to go next to the public forum. If anyone has any, thank you very much, Mr. McKnight. Thank you.
Tom,
yeah.
Tom, this is, I think you have a question in the chat.
Another
on
one?
The side. I'm seeing a question from Ashley Odell.
Okay. Ms. Odell?
Yes, I apologize for the late submission of the question. Thank you for taking my question. I did have a point of clarification that I was hoping that the gentleman from Ignite could explore a little bit more. It sounded to me as if the advancement from step to step on the salary schedule was done based on 2 years of experience for each step versus sort of the traditional 1 year of experience. And then a second question I had was that it says it's a stipend opportunity for a master's or a doctorate. Is this not a guarantee? If you have that level of education, what is the recommendation there? I wanted some clarification if that can be offered. Thank you.
Tom, would you like for me to respond?
Yes, go ahead, Mr.
Very well. Yes, we're recommending that not recommending, but we're suggesting that the teaching or occupational experience be based on relevant teaching and occupational experience of the faculty member, and that they advance accordingly. We have not put forward a suggestion on advancement beyond hiring at this point. And there are practices that pertain to that, which I think the college should take into consideration. But we're simply looking at the placement of initial hires based upon either their occupational experience that's relevant and or teaching experience that's relevant. And then if there's a master's degree involved or required, that there be a stipend paid for that. I'm not sure if I answered your question fully or not. Give you an opportunity to respond.
Okay, I think that's sufficient for now. We'll have more opportunities to discuss this, I'm sure. So thank you, Mr. McKnight, for everyone, all the public commenters. We're now going to go to item 7, the public forum. If there's anyone who has a comment they want to make on anything that was that has not been covered in the meeting thus far.
President Epstein, is this time reserved specifically for members of the public, or can a board member make a comment?
No, it's for members of the public. Of course, members of the board may speak up as they wish, but let's do the public comment here first.
President Epstein, we do have a request for comment from Eric Calbright.
Okay. Go ahead, Eric.
Hello again. I'm still Eric Calbright, and I'm still president of the Community College Association. I simply wanted to go ahead and recognize Ashley Odell for being elected the president of the Calbright College Faculty Association. I'm confident that as the semester moves on, that she will do great things. And similarly, I will take a reduced role at attending these meetings and commenting, because the faculty are now in a position where they can go ahead and comment for themselves. I would like to also thank you, Tom Epstein, for your leadership on the Calbright board these last few years. This has not always been an easy meeting to attend as I've watched Calbright develop, but I've been very appreciative for your leadership and your willingness to listen to others. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Eric. And we will miss you as well. Your erudite comments are always a highlight of these meetings. And don't be a stranger. Feel free to come back anytime. Okay, so with that, I want to move back up to the action items, item 5.1. I don't know if Member Fitzgerald, is there something you need to say in this meeting at this moment?
I just had a comment on you know, I don't know where the correct area to say this is, to be honest. Maybe it was best reserved for order of the agenda, but I think, you know, traditionally, I'm just curious what the board's opinion. Traditionally, many districts have an opportunity at the end of Board of Trustees meetings to request future agenda items. I think we might have used to do that. I don't remember, but I'm wondering if our meetings in the future will have that opportunity, how we feel about that. Yeah, and even extending it this meeting.
I
President,
believe.
This is.
Go ahead.
I want to affirm what Colma said. Usually there is an item that asks for future agenda items or additional information to be shared with the board.
Okay, we have not done that in the past. I think we can, I don't know if, does that need to be agendized before it can be raised, or can?
Can I ask a clarifying question, Tom, maybe for
Sure.
Pam or Colum, who might be more familiar? So what's the distinction between having it on the agenda and then or requesting it through the chair?
So if I can explain, so it is agendized. There's two agenda items at the end of the meeting. One of them toward the end of the meeting. One of them is to give board reports, and the other is to agendize future possibilities. So and the distinction is that then those are sort of public requests that either can be given in a public meeting if it's a big enough or important enough issue that all of the board members get to hear and potentially respond to, or it can be given in a written report depending on what the issue is. When we go sort of independently to our chancellor or to our president,
I'm sorry, I just got a note from our general counsel that since this is not agendized, we shouldn't be discussing it. So,
okay.
But I think going forward with our new president who knows all about this, these agendas will be remedied, I'm sure.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
So
dump that right there.
So with that, back to item 6.1, or excuse me, to 5.1. As I mentioned earlier, we're looking for a motion to adjourn and continue, which will allow us to reconvene at noon tomorrow to elect new members of the executive committee once there's a new president of the board, and that changes the composition of the executive committee. And of course, we also have a vacancy. So with that, I'm looking for a motion to adjourn and continue.
So moved.
Second.
I think Member Grande got in for the second there. Is there any discussion? Okay, please call the roll.
Hildegard Aguinaldo,
Aye.
Darius Anderson,
Yes.
Amy Costa,
Aye.
Tom Epstein,
Aye.
Felicia Escobar Carrillo,
Aye.
Colm Fitzgerald,
Aye.
Jolena Grande,
Aye.
Pam Haynes,
Aye.
Kevin Hall,
Aye.
Lieutenant Governor Eleni Kounalakis, Jennifer Perry, Bill Rawlings,
Aye.
Valerie Shaw,
Aye.
Blas Villalobos,
Aye.
and Joseph Williams.
Aye.
Okay, thank you. So we are adjourned and we'll reconvene at noon tomorrow, or if the Board of Governors meeting ends after noon tomorrow, we will convene immediately upon the termination of the Board of Governors meeting. Thank you all.